I would like to take the chance not only to thank you all for supporting us and believing in us during these extraordinary times. I would actually like to send energy and thoughts to all those who have suffered or even lost their beloved ones in these difficult times. Some of them are participating in today's Cognitive Virtual. Our words are addressed to you. We wish you all much strength and will always be there for you. It's not only about share for success, it's also about care for each other. I always love to say it's about human technology, but in this special moment, I want to express that there is nothing more important in our lives like human for human. And this brings me straight to our topic, leadership and AI. As AI makes more decisions, the nature of leadership will change. The human remains the central element. And if we succeed together. In our rapidly and ambiguously changing business environments, where AI has more knowledge and experience, and therefore makes better and faster decisions than humans, the essence of effective leadership needs to be adapted. This cognitive virtual will shed light on the change in leadership, which is corresponding to renewed business environments driven by cognitive technology for the benefit of business and society. The focus of our keynotes and experts discussion today on as AI makes more decisions, the nature of leadership will change, will be around the interrelation between leadership, trust and AI, about leadership and technology alignment, and about practical insights into renewed leadership. I want to encourage you to use the chat and connect with your AI peers and the speakers globally. A lot of you thanked us for having virtually met like-minded people or beneficial business contacts through our platform. Feel free to share your thoughts, comments, and LinkedIn links to build further fruitful partnership. Share in the chat where you are where are you joining us from, showing the world our strengths as we work together to build a global and responsible AI community. So why wait? Act now and enjoy an insightful event starting with our opening keynote by George Kaul-Green, who will talk about can we solve AI's trust problem through renewed leadership. Dear audience, it's more than a special opportunity and a great honor to have someone like George contributing to our community. Thank you so much, George. George, you are an organizational and clinical psychologist and distinguished professor of leadership and organizational behavior at IMD Business School in Switzerland, as well as a consultant to global companies. You are a frequent speaker at management and professional conferences around the world, including the World Business Forum, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations. You are a thought leader focused on high-performance leadership, high-performance teamwork, conflict management, change management, dialogue and negotiation, coaching, the person's effects, stress management, work-life balance, and personal and professional development. You're also a police psychologist and hostage negotiator focusing on aggression management and hostage negotiations. You have worked in over 100 countries spanning 5 continents. George, you are the founder and director of the High Performance Leadership Program, the flagship 6-day IMD program for the experienced senior leaders, and the Advanced High Performance Leadership for former HPL participants. You're a notable media commentator on issues related to leadership, conflict, aggression management, and hostage negotiation, and had your own highly acclaimed radio call-in talk show in the US for over 10 years. Your work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, the Financial Times, Forbes, and other leading newspapers and magazines. You have been a speaker at TEDx talks in both New York and Lausanne. Dear George, I can't imagine a better expert for today's subject. We do not take it for granted having you kicking off today's Cognitive Virtual. George, the virtual global Swiss cognitive stage is all yours.
Wow. Thank you, Dalit. I really appreciate that introduction. And I'm very happy to be here today to address one of the most fundamental leadership issues in the worldwide AI community, and that is trust. How we can build trust. And we know that trust is at the foundation of what we have to do. And it really, really is dependent on leadership. Okay. And understanding this quote, if we can move the slides, the sad fact is that many people don't trust decisions, answers, or recommendations from artificial intelligence. We are fighting an uphill battle, and the trust is based on the human emotion of fear, and below the fear is loss. That the key to establishing trust is going to be psychological safety, okay? And understanding that leadership is the key to high-performing success. We know that you can reach a certain level of success, but don't go higher when leadership puts a lid on it. So leaders have to lift a person's vision to higher heights, raise a person's performance to higher standards, and of building personalities beyond normal limitations. That's the great management leadership leader Peter Drucker quoted. And we know that in AI, we have to bring a new vision, a new cutting edge part of understanding the whole mechanism of trust. Now, I'm just quoting here from your own organization, from SwissCognitive. These are the basic values that are driving you: emotional intelligence, agility, empathy, cultural intelligence. These are all leadership issues. I want to ground today's short session in helping you understand that you have the fundamental values there. How do we implement that? That's the leadership issue. Next. And over the whole process, we have to understand what it means to be a psychological and a physical hostage. Nelson Mandela, an icon of a leader who was at the cutting edge of driving change. And you all in AI are driving change. You have to understand change. And he spent 27 years in prison, coming out, speaking reconciliation and forgiveness. After 27 years, he could have been bitter. He could have been resentful. But no, his mindset was let bygones be bygones. And he used a poem, Evictus. And the heart of that poem was, I am the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. You see, he was a physical hostage, but he didn't feel like a hostage. And that's one of my messages today. Leaders are facing all kinds of challenges, all kinds of obstacles, but never feel like a hostage. Even if you have a gun to your head, you don't have to feel like a hostage. You still have power to talk, still have power to breathe. You still have an inner world, okay? And understanding then the difference between physical hostage and psychological hostage. Now, as a hostage negotiator, I've been involved in hundreds of negotiations. And with physical hostage taking, we can get a 95% success rate, as measured by the FBI and Interpol here in Europe. That is, once a hostage negotiator enters, he has to create a bond, a connection, an emotional pathway to that hostage taker. And understanding the pain, the motivation. Why is this person taking hostages? Happy people don't take hostages. So being able to understand loss, and behavioral economics really has taught us that loss is more powerful in motivating than benefit. That's why in AI, you really have to be able to empathize with the fear, the pain. And lastly, to make concessions. Hostage negotiators can get a 95% success rate of no further injuries after they intervene. But here's what's interesting. Psychological hostage taking is even more rampant than physical hostage taking. We can be a psychological hostage to a situation, to an environment, to a boss, to a colleague, in personal life, all kinds of situations. We can be a hostage to the pandemic. And there are many people who feel like a hostage to that pandemic. And there are people who can feel like a hostage to AI. You have to be setting people free. And the same techniques that we use to get that 95% success rate, you as a leader can engage in. And the point is never, ever to be a hostage. How do you know when you're a hostage? When you feel defensive, when you feel like you are being held back. And okay, and understanding yeah, how are you a hostage and how do you feel helpless? Okay. And we have to understand the fears, and below the fears, the losses. That's what defeats more things than ever. People have a lack of trust in AI because they fear it, because there's a loss that they have to deal with. The point is, people do not naturally resist change. They resist the fear of change or the unknown or the losses that are going to occur. You, as a leader in AI, have to be a secure base to create the psychological safety that people choose change. We know in hostage situations, you don't get succeed by telling hostage takers to come out. No, it's done by empathetic connection and by giving choice, primarily through asking questions. Okay? And understanding that this starts in the foundation of connection. The number one role of leaders, and the number one reason why leaders fail, bar any, is that they don't connect well. They have to attach, and then they have to bond. And bonding is that special connection that follows, in which you then feel the emotional availability and connection in that relationship. Hostage negotiators create a bond even to the enemy, to an adversary. You don't have to like someone to bond to them. You, as an AI specialist, have to be able to create bonds to people who are adversaries, people who are critical, people who are your enemy. And it's through that bonding that you can transform them into an ally. And the bonding is always going to be interrupted at some point, short or long term, by separation. And separation has to do with loss. This is behavioral economics in action. Loss is more powerful in determining decision making than benefit. Never forget that you as a leader have to be able to connect to the pain and the fear and the losses, and you engage in this with good dialogue. And separation opens the grief process, and then grieving activates a new attachment. Okay? And just very quickly, understanding how you have to go through this grief in order to reconnect. And you do this by being a secure base. A secure base is a person, a place, a goal, an object that provides a sense of protection, gives a sense of comfort, and offers a source of energy and inspiration. That is the role of AI. The leaders and AI itself has to be a secure base. But if you don't trust AI and you don't trust the people who are leading it, how are you ever going to feel protected to explore, take risks, and seek change? Once you have that sense of secure base, the psychological safety, wow, you're off to all kinds of exploration, taking risks, and seeking change. Remember, people don't naturally resist change. They resist the pain of change and the fear of the unknown. Okay? And understanding this starts in the mindset, in the brain. How is it that the brain is positive or negative? It's what we pay attention to. And perception, emotions affect the mind's eye. Many people who don't trust AI see it as negative because they fear it. They have a loss connected to it. So what has to happen is understanding.
Okay, somehow we lost connectivity to George. I hope he will be back very soon. It seems to be a lost bondage. Yeah, I mean, in the meantime, I'm used to it. This is part of the game, as we all know. And I just can tell the same thing again and again and again. We're struggling with basic infrastructure. So without connectivity, these things are going to be difficult. So let's give another minute and see if we can get George back. In the meantime, I would like quickly to summarize something that I just wrote, what he just said, what for me is very essential, is that we have to set people free, that it's actually our own responsibility, the responsibility of experts and leadership to make sure that we onboard the people and the whole society. I'm just hearing that George is back, so let's listen again to George. For me, these are the longest seconds, as you can imagine, waiting someone's coming back on the virtual stage. Thanks, George. You're back again.
Okay, am I there now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Do I have just a couple minutes to wrap up here?
Definitely.
Okay, very good. If I can get my slides back, I will be very brief because I know we're on a tight time schedule. I'm sorry about what happened there. I don't know where the origin of that is. Here's the point. The brain is fundamentally negative. So when you're dealing with a very untrusting person, someone who is critical, an adversary, even an enemy, you know their brain is working perfectly correct. To survive, we have to see danger. And you can see danger anywhere, anytime that you so want. But you as a secure base, creating psychological safety and trust can help shut down the brain's drive to negativity, and then you can start looking for opportunities. And the world of AI, as you all know, is filled with opportunities, okay? And then understanding that this means dialogue. You have to seek a greater truth by thinking together. Please, you have to, as leaders, engage your adversary, engage your enemy, engage the person who's attacking you, who's critical. Do not disengage from conflict. Do not disengage from those who disagree, okay? And it's through conflict that we see a solution. Conflict is fundamentally positive. Why? Because it's based on difference between two or more persons or groups, characterized by tension, emotionality, disagreement, and polarization, where bonding is broken or lacking. You see, if you've got a big difference and you don't break the bond, you don't truly have a conflict. Or you can have a small difference, break the bond, and you have a huge conflict. So you have to not be conflict avoidant. You have to be willing to be rejected, be humiliated, be attacked, and then be able to engage that person for you to understand what their fears are. What are the losses? And this is going to come out in all kinds of emotion, okay? And understanding that this survival level of the brain, you're always going to be dealing with, and the emotional side, what does, am I losing? Am I connected? And then the power is in the executive states, making choice. You always, always have a choice. And that's what you're trying to do in building trust. Get the other person, not by telling them what they should think, by helping them, influencing and persuading them to see the benefit, okay? And then understanding, if you want to understand more about leadership, you can always go to my website, LinkedIn, and so forth, and okay. And there are the two books that carry these messages through. One, how hostage negotiation techniques can be used in leadership, and then the whole idea of secure-based leadership. And lastly, what I want all of you to remember is do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. AI is doing that, but the leaders are not always doing that. So as a leader, please get out there, get those paths, even when you don't know where you're going for sure. So there you go. Do we still have a time for a question, or
we do have time for a question. First of all, thanks a lot for sharing your vast experience with us. It's really special to have someone like you bringing together the two worlds and connecting all this human reflecting and the technology. And at the end of the day, I think we as humans need the tools. There's one question that I would like to ask you. What would be a perfect metaphor you can share with us with regards to AI, fear, and gaining trust out of our daily life?
Okay, there are so many examples of people who have walked into a negative environment, created a bond, and then was able to reduce the violence, and they end up as friends. I can give many examples of people who hated one another. They engage one another and they transform the enemy into an ally. And to do that, you have to be able to not be a hostage, to not be a hostage to your own fear. So it's leading yourself and leading others. And the bonding is like electricity. When you connect, it's like putting the plug in the socket. That's the attachment. But when you turn on the light, electricity flows, and that chemistry, either negative or positive, is a powerful way to understand bonding. Connect with your enemies, your adversaries.
I must say, this is something that I've learned from my mother since I was a small child. If you can't fight them, join them. What really makes me thinking of what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Great, thanks a
Well,
lot. We do have an, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, what I know from the IT community that I know of at IMD, Mike Wade and our whole program there, is that the IT people often have not been trained in good dialogue. They don't know how to talk with negative emotions facing them. And they don't really understand that change can happen when you give the person a chance to be understood. And that is something leaders in AI have to understand and do.
Definitely. And I think there is a lot what we can also learn, not only with regards to AI, to be more open across culture and countries.
And your mother was a great leadership teacher, huh?
She is still, actually, even my grandma, she's still alive.
Oh.
Now I have another question for you I would like to share with you. What kind of leadership will maximize the development and growth of AI, and how do we best train for this type of leadership?
I think it's by being able to understand what influence and persuasion is about. Because leadership is influencing and persuading. Getting a vision, that is easier. Getting a strategy is easier. But how to implement a strategy, how to bring people together. I work with teams all over the world who fight with each other, who are not bonded, not connected. Or I work with organizations who are in mining and all kinds of things where they're disrupting communities. There's so much hostility, but they have to sit down with those people and engage in that influencing and persuasion. So I think AI has to see that the truth is not in your technology. God love your technology. Isn't it amazing what AI is doing? And the people have to see the opportunity. But to do that, the leaders of AI have to connect to those people who don't trust AI. And then person by person, group by group, you build that connection. And leadership is ultimately going to the highest level of your own performance and helping others around you.
Thanks a lot. I could go on for hours with you discussing, George. And I would like very much to thank you for your contribution to our global AI community without borders and sharing your vast experience. We're looking very, very much forward to more collaboration with you and the IMD in the future. George, thanks a lot, and see you very soon.
I appreciate that. And thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Now I'm excited to introduce you to our first panel discussion about practical insights into renewed leadership, chaired by Ganesh. Ganesh, you are a technologist, storyteller, and entrepreneur who's passionate about data, AI, and its power to augment the human experience. An engineer by education, you founded and grew business units at Dell early in your career, and then your entrepreneurial journeys working early with Cognitive Scale, co-founding Molecular, and now work for Beyond Minds at their head of BD and partnership. You also have a show called Stories in AI, where you interview AI leaders around the world and captures their stories to inspire action in AI. I'm honored to introduce you to our diverse panel coming from various businesses, giving a comprehensive overview about the practical insights to renewed leadership. With Ganesh on the panel, we do have Valeria. You are a digital transformation lead at PwC with a focus on leveraging emerging technology and strategic partnership to solve organizational challenges. You focus on delivery of business-critical projects leading to enhanced workplaces, efficiencies, operational decision-making, sustainable practice for various multinational corporations. In addition, you hold a PhD in information systems and passionate about researching and educating on socially responsive AI, decision-making, and decision intelligence, using AI for good and social innovation. You have lived and worked across Europe, Southeast Asia, Oceania, and now in the US. From the US, we do have Brett. You are Senior Vice President and Global Market Head of AI and Analytics at Cognizant Digital Business. You are a leader in AI and data, applying them to drive digital transformation across industries. You are a passionate innovator and business leader who delivers business growth, accelerates new technologies, and transforms his clients and organization and us. You are a powerful and effective communicator who inspires the organization and delivers clear messages to the market. Adept at working across culture and with clients from the largest enterprises to the smallest, most nimble startups. Now we have Marisa. Marisa, you are a researcher at Skip, a cybersecurity and tech company in Zurich. You are conducted research about AI and technology from a psychological perspective with a wide range of questions related to psychological phenomena, governance, and ethical implications. Your research area are about trust, behavioral performance measurements of conversational AI, and lethal autonomous weapons system. As an organizational psychologist, you have experience in social and educational institutions with a specific passion for digital teaching learning trends and have been teaching in several higher education institutions in Germany and Switzerland. You published various media articles, books, and papers, and are a frequent speaker on conferences and events worldwide. Last but not least, Marisa is chairing the Women in AI in Switzerland, is a SwissCognitive ambassador, and a very good friend of ours. Last but not least, with you on the stage, we have Philip. You are a professor at Saarland University and scientific director at the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence and are one of the co-founders of CLAIR, bringing together the European AI community for excellence across all of AI for all of Europe and beyond. With a human-centered focus, you combined research in AI, visual computing and simulations, and high-performance computing to enable trusted AI, the ability to provide practical guarantees about AI systems. My dear AI thought leaders, the virtual stage is yours. Ganesh, may I hand over to you?
Right even. I don't want to click it now, but so I just have it before we forget at the end.
So we're all on the screen. Just smile.
All right. Can you all hear me? I'm assuming you guys can hear me. And okay. All right. So thank you, Dalit, for the introduction. Am I good to go? Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Dalit and Andy. Thanks for putting this great event together. And I'm really honored to be with this amazing set of panelists today. And I'm really thrilled to be sharing this conversation. Artificial intelligence is an exponential force in our society, right? It changes the way we live, we work, we collaborate, and communicate. It is probably the single most impactful innovation of technology in our lifetime and has predicted to have a $13 trillion impact to world GDP by 2030. Now, today's topic is the nature of leadership and how it evolves and changes in a world that's going to increasingly become more intelligent, right? With AI and automation, in a world where we'll have humans, AI agents, both semi-autonomous and autonomous devices and autonomous agents and cognitive processes all running within the society, within organizations, within the world, it really impacts everybody around us, our customers, our partners, our suppliers, and employees. And the nature of leadership in organizations calls for some unprecedented changes. So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to focus on some practical insights with this renewed leadership needed at this time. And I have Valeria, Brad, Marissa, and Philip with me today. So I'm going to start directly into this and start with Valeria on the question of, Valeria, you and I were talking about Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0 and how this change and evolution of historical innovations that are just caught up to where we are today, right? Why is this critical today in terms of leadership and the need for leadership? Why is this renewed sense of leadership needed for Industry 4.0? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Ganesh. First of all, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to echo your comments and say that we live in the most interesting time at the moment, right? We are actually on the edge of Industry 4.0, digitalization, automation, and Industry 5.0, right? It's all about mass customization, personalization, and so on. So what we're expecting now, that the fifth industrial revolution will actually push forward more advanced human-machine interfaces, interconnection, interrelations, right? So we are expecting faster turnaround, more precise decisions, more efficiency, more customization, faster speed, better quality. So all of this creates already complexity, and we are flooded with the data, right? So we are actually expecting AI take over the decision making on a daily basis. And the next generation of managers and the leadership, actually what they need to do, they need to allow AI to the board, right? They need to let them to make a decision, let it enter, don't put the boundaries in. And then they use the advantages of AI for the complex problem solving, and actually use the advantages of this unemotional decision making that AI has got overcome the human limitations, right? Such as natural biases and emotions. So I think this is the first step. And then by this, letting AI to make automation, we don't expect now the leadership to make all of the decisions, right? We should be outsourcing simple tasks to machine. We came to this point. We don't have time anymore. So, and then the second, this will actually free up the leadership, the team, the TCU to focus on more highly intelligent human aspects of decision making. Actually, that's the one on innovation thinking, strategy development, workforce transformation, and this one of the essential impacts is how do we bring humans and technology together, right? So we can stay on the wave of digital transformation and the technology innovation as well. So I think that's why the first of the steps that we should be taking is actually getting AI into the board.
Awesome. Valeria, this is, it's amazing you say that. We get into this world where we're in the midst of the explosion of data, the explosion of intelligence and non-living things, and not just human beings are being intelligent and stuff, right? And so I want to turn this into Brett and ask him with his experience with working with a large set of organizations across the world, leading the analytics and AI practice at Cognizant. How will decisions be made differently in this data-driven world?
So decisions for the last 30 years have been made based on someone handing someone a report saying something bad happened. And it's a huge focus on what happened instead of what's going to happen next. So what's really changing now is through the use of machine learning and AI, almost every data point that business leaders look at can now be driven as a forecast, a predictive model. So you don't ask just what happened, you need to ask why it happened and what's going to happen next. I think business leaders going forward are now looking at the information in front of them, not as historical past backwards looking view, but really here's what's happening right now, here's what is likely going to happen. And then on top of that, AI is adding prescriptive analytics. So I already saw during the pandemic the shift in, for example, in supply demand forecasting in retail, that almost every data point going on with revenue was really a forecast model, a predictive model with a confidence level of what might happen. And the really great decisions are being done with prescriptive analytics, using AI to not just see what might happen, but to prescribe what the best action to take is to get the outcome you want. And in those cases, like for example, we did a project on insurance underwriting. In underwriting, you can see what likely will happen, but also recommend the best rate to balance between revenue and customer satisfaction and profit and risk to get the best decision. And decision makers will consult with AI so that they can see ahead what's going to happen and what to do about it.
Awesome. And Brad, don't you also think it is also to do with the nature of the rate of change of data itself, right? You're now the speed at which new data comes along is very different. Now, you can always argue whether that lead to better, higher quality decisions versus it's the quality of the decisions are the same or so.
If I could just add, I think it's the speed of data, but also the volume of data. And what most people don't realize is they have no idea which data is causal. And so they tend to look at the data in front of them instead of knowing which data matters, watching for changes in data and using causality to really better understand which data to look for. It's a huge challenge and a great opportunity.
Awesome. Now we're in this topic talking about leadership itself, right? How it's not so much about just the technology, but the impact of that technology and what we need to do as business leaders to really thrive in this environment. And Marissa, you speak about leadership is not just management, right? Why is that important, especially in this data-driven AI era?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I kind of want to follow up on also what Brett just said. Yes, we have this opportunity to use more data and models, etc., to predict things maybe better. But on the other hand, I kind of want to call this the sweet poison of control illusion. So as a psychologist, we're always concerned with thinking, okay, what do we actually want to do and how do we get the decisions right? Because often what happens is that with kind of math washing, we just try to patch our wounds of a fear of being vulnerable. And so we always have to be careful that with the numbers, we just, we don't rely too much on these numbers, because all models, all regression models, everything we want to predict, everything is flawed, right? In psychology, we do prediction. That's the major goal of our studies. And we know that these things are flawed. And we always have to keep in mind that nothing in this is perfect. And people have the tendency to believe that these predictions, that everything what machines do are perfect. So, but coming back to your question, sorry, I just wanted to comment a little bit on what Brett said. And secondly, and it kind of relates to the difference between management and leadership. So management basically is thinking about how do we want to do the things. It's more operational. It's tasks, it's administration, it's rules, it's normative. Whereas leadership is a little, well, it's a little softer. It's more about influence. It's about how do we want to interact with our people. It's basically, it's a little softer, right? So, and especially now in this data-driven world, we want to make sure that we don't only think about management and the tasks we want to accomplish. We do really want to think about how do we want to be a leader? How do we want to serve our company, our community, our country as leaders, as the persons we are, and the approaches we take within our society?
No, it's awesome, Maurice. And you called out something very, very critical, right? Which is there is the qualitative aspect of actually gathering data and making decisions. And obviously, more data and more models doesn't necessarily mean higher quality decisions on the one hand. But that said, at least you will be empowering the human being to go make better decisions with a lot more data and a lot more analysis. But on the other hand, when it comes to leadership and the topic as such, it is more critical to also understand things that make us uniquely human, which is the emotional aspect, the empathy, the aspects of that. And that becomes very, very critical from, approaching it from that perspective, not just saying, hey, I can actually manage the task a lot more efficiently right now, but then complement that. I think that's the operative word, complement that with more human nature, unique elements, that is elements of human nature to make a higher quality decisions. Does anybody want to add? I think Philip had something to, looks like he has something to add on that note as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The human-centric approach is really critical. I mean, I'm the co-founder of Claire, which is the largest AI organization worldwide, actually, over 400 labs across Europe, 4,000, almost 4,000 supporters. And human-centric is really at the core of what we're doing. And the key element, I think, here is to understand that AI is just a tool, just like essentially all the other tools we're having. It's just an additional instrument that helps us to make life better, hopefully, if we use it correctly. But it has to be used under human control and for fulfilling the goals that we want to use those tools for our goals. We're not talking about AI for creating artificial humans or things like that. That is certainly not what we're doing, even though that's where a lot of the fear of AI comes from. So there's a pretty strong disconnect there. But we talk about the simulation aspect, the modeling aspect of the world, the prediction aspect. This is absolutely critical, and it's a little bit like weather forecast, right? I mean, yes, it's often wrong, but it gives you a very, very good hint of whether you need to take an umbrella tomorrow or not. And so, and in particular, we're getting better and better at predicting things. So we certainly haven't reached the end of AI tools. I would argue that we're actually at probably less than 10% of what we will know about AI in, I don't know, 20, 30 years from now. So there is a lot more to come and a lot more things will get accurate. But the critical element that I think you also alluded to is what we call trusted AI, right? A lot of the AI method today work under certain circumstances that are often very hard to describe. And a lot of the engineering technique that we know for hundreds of years, like, right, when they built the old cathedrals many hundred years ago, they used testing, right? They built small models, put sand sacks on top of them and looked whether that break together or not. Or we use theories, we use mathematical tools, and both of those tools don't always work with some of the newer AI techniques. And so we really need to develop the tools to know when our AI techniques give us the correct answers and where they might go wrong, right? I mean, we all know those examples. And so there's actually a lot that still needs to do to make that tool reliable to the degree that we can rely on it under even conditions where, right, we think it works, but the statistics just doesn't make it work in under certain circumstances. So there's a lot that still needs to be done to make it a reliable tool for human-centric AI.
Can we comment on that actually, Ganesh, or is it?
Please do. Please do.
Can I just make one small comment, because I think this is an important point, because we hear that a lot, right? AI is a tool, and there are certain people who say that, and I have now kind of changed this perspective, because I think if you say AI is just a tool, you have on the one hand people who lose their fear and think, okay, it's not going to kill us, etc. On the other hand, I think it neglects the impact it has on our society, whereas we're taking a more relational approach, because it's sort of interwoven in our society, and thus it has an effect. And if we say it is just a tool, we also sometimes kind of neglect some effects that it will have, for sure. I just kind of wanted to support your
Thanks for bringing that up, Marissa, because I mean it's just no, I'm on that camp too, right? That said, I think the state of where AI is today, it's not Terminator and Skynet, right? It's basically, at best, it's a Jarvis suit for Iron Man, right? That allows us to do our job better, right? And now that said, I think there's a lot of subtle impacts that are happening in the society as such, right? Like how we humanify Alexas and Google, right? The impact it's going to have long-term in kids. My son talks to Alexa for an hour before he goes to bed, right? Asking about all the questions he had. He learns about all the things he made notes of, and he's asking Alexa at the night, right? I mean, I don't know how this is going to play out in the long run. So there's definitely an aspect of that. But I think I think where AI is today, for sure, is very much as a very powerful tool that can actually really move the needle for human cognition. That shouldn't give us it shouldn't make us complacent, is what you're actually calling out as well. Valeria, did you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to say, I don't think we do have a choice, right? It's part of the evolution and we have to progress with that. It's not like it's bad or it's good. No, it is there. That's it. Just move on. Start accepting it. Start using it as much as you can.
I know. Transhumanism is
from evolving.
Yeah, we're all evolving.
There's no door for that.
Transhumanism is a different topic. So let's coming back to this, right? So on the first round of questions, I think the couple of quick takeaways, right? One is we're in this industry 4.0 where decisions have to be made, and you have an explosion of data and models to assist you to make higher quality decisions. But don't forget the human side of things, of actually now complement the qualitative aspect with the quantitative, innately human aspects. You get highly powered decisions. Let's explore a little bit on the how part of it, right? And Brett, let me start with you. You work with a lot of organizations, as I mentioned. Now, I'll start with an anecdote. About 2.5 years ago, I was on a plane with the COO and the chief strategy officer of one of the largest mutual funds in the world. And we had a good conversation, and in the midst of it, he was telling me how he's almost mandating that every business person he hires knows how to code in Python, right? And I found it very fascinating how they were thinking about it, right? How organizations and companies were thinking about it. Now, let me ask you this question, your experience. Will business leaders need to be data scientists? Do we need to, is that the way we embrace this whole AI and machine learning in our organizations? How do we go about it?
So I don't think business leaders need to be data scientists, literally, the same way that Jeff Bezos probably wasn't a webmaster at Amazon, but I think they do need to understand the implications of data and AI, become extremely data literate. I'll call it AI aware, because they're going to be basically making investments and decisions about the future of their business, the impact on society, and doing so without a real understanding of data is a huge issue. I mentioned before causality. Knowing which data is causal versus correlated is a huge gap today in many business leaders, and they tend to focus on the data right in front of them instead of the data that matters the most. They also have a trouble dealing with uncertainty. So almost every predictive model is inherently uncertain. I think Marissa touched on that. Their models are not precise, they're indicative. And so knowing which ones to apply in different situations means understanding how to look at uncertainty and risk in a model, recognizing it's inherent in the model, and then knowing how to apply it and where and when. And then, I think the biggest issue is that data is extremely messy, almost always wrong. And most people either assume they can't work with it because it's wrong, or they don't know how to work with it just because it's not precise and accurate. There's no perfect data, but models built off of data can be indicative and give you a really strong indication of what's happening. And it's why those uncertainty measurements matter so much. So I think for business leaders who fear messy data, unstructured data, inaccurate data, they're missing the potential to get real meaning and really strong market signals that might tell them what's going to happen. And I'll reflect back on the pandemic when there was a huge shortage of flour and yeast in all the big box stores. Most people assume that was a shocking surprise. But if you looked at social media, you would have seen the huge uptick in home baking and sourdough bread, which is a really strong leading indicator of upcoming shortages, but most people missed it. So you can't miss these signals anymore. We have to become much more data centric, and business leaders can do that.
Awesome. Now, let me ask a more fundamental question to you, Philip. I'll based on you're on the forefront of researching, AI and its impact on society, right? Human-made decisions versus AI agents making decisions, autonomous decisions, right? Is there a specific framework that business leaders should employ to actually look at what kind of decisions are best made by AI agents versus, an AI-assisted framework by a human?
Well, I think the most important part is that we can't offload responsibility, right? That is the part that I mentioned. It is a tool that is being used. And yes, electricity is also a tool and has made huge changes to the way we live. Yes, it is a really important and consequential tool that we're having here. But the point is, we decide how we use AI. And so we cannot offload the responsibility and say, oh, but the AI said that I should do this or that. That's not how it works. it becomes even a higher responsibility to, as Brett just said, to actually interpret the data and interpret the outcome of the AI system in the right way, and ask critical questions, right? Because they are not perfect, and there is uncertainty in the data, and be aware of that. The other thing, it changes the decision-making process, right? Because it's not, you have to deal with the fact that it's not another human that gives you a hint of what to do, but a machine and how to interpret this. But it also greatly accelerates the transformation process, right? The speed with which you can make decisions, which maybe took weeks before and probably is, I don't know, maybe in minutes or hours now. That is something that business have a hard time adapting to, right? Because the processes often are not set up, in particular as we inject AI, which is into traditional businesses, right? Like which is a big topic here in Europe because we have this strong and long-term traditional industry, right? Adding AI to this is really a difficult process because so much things change, and that is to be aware of that. And I think it was mentioned before, really make that a top level, board level decision and involve the entire company top down instead of just doing it in a corner. I think that's a very important point here.
Awesome. Thank you, Philip. And, Marissa, let me ask you this question, bring in the with your background, both psychology and technology, right? So what is the nature of leadership needed to win in this era, right? Is it big bang transformational leadership, like, hire super senior type A players who will just go hire a whole new set of team members and then just go, really force down to the bottom across the organization transformations? Is that what is going to win? Because it's a completely new paradigm with AI and data decision making. What kind of leadership style would win in this environment?
Yeah, I kind of want to mention two things here, and I'm starting with number two, and I also gets back to what Brett said, how to deal with uncertainty. I think this is he said some very valuable things here, and these are things that leaders can already integrate in their design process. How do we want to, for example, how do we want to deal with, for example, in an automated driving, you can have reliability displays. How certain is the car at the moment with making decisions? How do we want to communicate these things? I think that was extremely important. Also, how can we employ participative design within our company, so that who do we want to integrate with in our earliest stages of designing our product, or if we just injecting it in a company, who do we want in there? So I think these are the two things I just wanted to touch upon. I think Brett said some really, really important things here. So how do we want to deal with uncertainty? How can we incorporate participative design? But going back to your question, I think in our opinion, or my opinion, it's modesty is the name of the game. And I kind of want to say, forget all this transformation. I'll go, yes, we can things. But that's maybe my opinion. But I think being modest about what we know, what we do. Leaders can say, listen, I have no idea about tech. Can you help me? And tech people can say, listen, I have no idea about management. Can you help me? So I think there's we should, get down without, be modest, be open. Say yes to vulnerability. And this also increases trust between our companies, trust between our cultures and clients, and so on. So in my opinion, also based on the articles we've wrote, I think modesty these days and the willingness to learn and stay critical are the key features to not only survive, but also thrive in this era.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Valeria, and you and I were talking about talent, and this comes down to translates to talent management in the new era. Talk to us a little bit about how we should approach it, how business leaders should approach it.
Yeah, actually, the question of workforce transformation is quite essential for most of the clients, for everyone actually, and nowadays. And technology is getting smarter and technology is getting simpler, and we assume that all of the tools such as AutoML, no-code, low-code AI will actually make our life easier and will simplify the automation, will simplify AI model development. However, it is still not as easy as it seems like, and it's still complex. So the solution is actually it's a creation of this workforce strategy transformation, which is not a one-day solution, right? Which needs to focus on 3 levels of skills. And it's usually citizen users, citizen developers, and data scientists. And what the organization start now doing is actually they start training the AI citizen users. Everyone in the workforce should have an understanding of AI, what AI is doing, the basic knowledge of AI, so they can manage AI in their daily operation. And then the second layer, which is 5 to 10% of their workforce, should actually become a citizen developers, which are the one that can start managing the boards, do the basic data manipulation for AI, build the models, create the use cases for them, further on for data scientists and data engineers to actually pick up and work through the technical aspect. Okay, the problem, obviously, everyone is going to come back and say, where do I get the data engineers and data scientists and so on? So the enterprise kind of education would help with the citizen users and citizen developers. But the third layer is actually where the organization needs to kind of step in and start building a relationship with university, create the right apprenticeships, right, build and nurture the talent from beginning. So I think it's essential, and it's essential to begin and to start work on this now rather than later, because it will pay off in a couple of years.
That's awesome. Thank you, Valeria. And we're running out of time, so I got to wrap this up very quick. But I think that you made, all of you made some really critical points around inclusion, right? How do you actually, I think the technology transition that's going to happen in organizations is going to also create this wave of people who know and or have embraced this technology and AI and automation, and people who haven't, right? So there's going to be a lot of inclusion, modesty as a leader, making sure that you're showcasing the vulnerability and bringing everybody along in the journey is going to be critical. So I got rapid fire questions for all of you. And, the first one is a really short question. You got to answer it in like maybe 3 words, right? In a world where AI is making all these decisions or assisting to make your decisions, what is one mistake a business leader should not make? I'll start with you, Marissa.
With whom?
With Marissa.
In 3 words?
Yes.
Never stop thinking.
Never stop thinking.
Never stop thinking.
Brett.
Do not delegate this just to data scientists. We're all responsible.
Do not delegate, but that was more than 3 words. That's awesome. Valeria.
Okay, maybe I will say what to start doing, right? Because it's easier. I think start small, evolve, scale, and fail fast.
Awesome. Philip.
Modesty is good, but don't wait. Be proactive and be willing to take risks and be willing to engage with research, because AI is changing so quickly and will keep changing so quickly that you have to be prepared to change things as you develop them, as you introduce them, and as you use them. Sorry, we're more than 3 words.
No, that's awesome.
I think another one, don't follow the hype. Automation, technology will keep changing, evolving. Don't follow. Focus on your own strategy and your own problems.
Yes. I'm going to ask Brett and Marissa only the next question, which was the other side of this, right? Give me one takeaway for business leaders, because you guys both touched upon both what you shouldn't do and what you should do, right? So Brett, one takeaway for business leaders listening here, what should they do today practically when they get out of this meeting?
It's time to let go of fear and start to learn.
Awesome. Marissa, what should they do?
Connect. Okay, wait, let me the next thing you do is now connect to one of these people on this, conference, and ask a question you haven't understood or something you want to learn about. Just connect, be open, and communicate something.
Awesome. I'm sure we'll have in the show notes and in the collateral of the event contact details for every one of us. It was such a pleasure and a great honor to have all of you, Marissa, Philip, Brett, and Valeria, to have you on the panel. This was a blast. I think as leaders, it is upon us to actually really embrace this transition that is happening, even accelerate it, because it's for the benefit of humanity. And we are really in this I call it the Goldilocks moment in history, wherein we have the ability to shape the future and bring our organizations with us when we do it. So good luck to all the business leaders. Thank you so much
Thanks a
for
lot.
watching and listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Ganesh.
everyone. It was a
Thanks
pleasure.
a lot. Just
Thank you
remain
so
quickly
much,
with
guys.
us.
right.
First of all, it was great. Again, I could listen to you on and on and on. And thanks a lot, Marisa, for this saying, hey, get connected with our speakers, with your peers in the chat. And I would just like to add my 3 words, or actually SwissCognitive 3 words: share for success. I think this is the essence at the end that will put everything what you said together. Valeria, Brad, Marisa, and Phil, it was great having you with us, and Ganesh for this professional and involving moderation. We have such a diverse audience with us. I can imagine how much they benefit from all of your insightful experience. Take care, have a great summer, and now let's switch to practical insights and listen to Ali, who will talk about adjusting mindset, skill set, and tool set to remain relevant and effective. Ali, you are a transformation leader with more than 20 years of technical and executive experience. You are the former Chief Technology Officer at Sephora, where you were responsible for driving digital transformation and the innovation agenda. You are an active investor and advisor to multiple innovative AI startups and a sought-after mentor, thought leader, and speaker on current and emerging topics ranging from AI to customer experience. Ali, please share with us your insights. The stage is yours. We're waiting for Ali to share his video with us.
That fantastic introduction. So what I would like to share with you guys today is the experience we've had in terms of looking at how leadership that has adopted the requisite adjustments for using AI have benefited in a specific industry, retail, where we worked significantly. And to start understanding from that and deriving the lessons for leadership in general, outside of retail as well. So if we can go to the next slide. If we move from the agenda slide to the first slide, think about leadership as fundamentally about decision-making. So when you're making decision-making in retail, you're looking at the whole value chain, and there is plenty opportunities where decisions have to be made. And the decisions have to be made about which suppliers to use, how you're going to be distributing to your retail stores, and which customers you want to target. And throughout this decision value chain, there are really 3 elements that we want to look at. We want to look at scale and understand the decision in terms of, are we making a decision at a human scale, at a machine scale, or a digital scale? An example of a human scale decision is I need to make a decision to communicate with one individual or a couple of individuals, and I can pick up the phone and call those individuals and communicate with them. The minute I need to automate that so that there is something that reminds me of how I communicate and who I need to communicate with when, we get to a machine level, which brings in the level of automation. But once actually you need more than automation, you need some level of intelligence that takes signals from the environment, processes them, and makes intelligent insights about when and how you're going to take action. Then it becomes a cognitive and digital decision that needs to be taken care of. The second element is speed. And again, as you guys have heard from the prior speakers, we're moving from people looking at information and data from a historical perspective of what happened in the past to actually more real-time or near real-time, and even informing what decisions we're going to be making about the future. And we see this in retail, especially when we're looking at the supply chain aspect of retail. In the world of e-commerce, where customers are constantly changing what their buying decisions are, and retailers are having to respond to those needs in near real time, that speed becomes critical. And the final point of looking at decisions is about impact. You want to look at the impact. Is it at a local or global level? Is it an individual level? Or is that at a larger scale and deeper impact? Because these are really the things that will drive the decision-making of the leader. The other aspect, especially in retail, is to also realize that retail is personal. And therefore, whatever decisions we're making as leaders in retail have to take in consideration three things. We have to take in consideration values, both our values as a retailer, as a brand that reflects the brand values, but also the values of our consumers. And we also, like the prior speakers have mentioned, we need to take in the context of emotions and the context of the circumstances that are driving not only the decision of the leader, but the decisions of the other stakeholders. Next. So if we look at one aspect of how AI is being used in retail, it's usually through the consumer interaction. Retailers today, starting with the digital natives like the Amazons of the world and the brick and mortar retailers who are waking up to the importance of using AI to drive better results, the leaders there are starting actually now to analyze consumer behavior and understand it better. Once you understand it, then you're able to make better decisions about your optimization approach. And you're also then looking forward in the future and try to anticipate what your consumers' needs are going to be and hopefully meet them way before your competition is able to do that. And as I mentioned, next slide, as I mentioned in the prior slide, supply chain is one area where we're seeing the demand, and that demand is driven by both the scale in terms of the scale of the global supply chain networks, but also the speed and the ability of the supply chain to be resilient and for the leadership decisions also to be resilient, so that if a shipment of by boat, for example, is denied access to a seaport for whatever reason, for security reasons, or like what we've seen in the current pandemic for health reasons, then you need to know about that event in as near real time as possible. And as leaders, you need to have actually sufficient informational context that allows you the comfort to make a decision that approaches an optimal outcome. And if you look at some of the studies that were done, and this is a study that was done back in 2018 by Symphony Retail, it's showing again that almost out of the surveyed leaders, at least in retail, 1/3 were saying that they were already using AI currently for demand forecasting. Almost half are using it for inventory planning. And again, a little over 1/3 were using it for replenishment and controlling the real-time replenishment cycles. And those are very encouraging signs that the adoption of AI to drive better decisions is getting better. So if we go to the next slide, what we're seeing basically is that AI is devouring all aspects of decisions that leaders have to deal with. And what's allowed for that is the abundance of digital data that is a direct result of the quantification of the different aspects of what retail are. So today, transactions, of course, are quantified because they've been digitized, they're numerical, everything from the point of sale to credit cards, right? But what's interesting now, because that's been there for a while, but what's interesting currently is we're starting to quantify persons, especially the consumer today is one of the most quantified entity in this world of data, right? We know more about our consumers today than we've ever had data about in the past. And the last one that's really interesting for me is the quantified experience. So instead of just looking at an individual, a consumer, for example, just as somebody who has certain attributes, and we look at what transactions they have done and what kind of demographic we can fit them into, smart retailers are starting to look at the whole experience, and the components of experience is not just the consumer themselves, but their interaction with the product. And beyond that, their interaction with the brand and their interaction with their social network. So it's that set of interactions that creates an experience. And if we can quantify that experience by actually collecting measurable data about it, then we can use that to actually drive the decisions that we need to drive. And if we use AI, we need to know that AI is basically this quantification done on steroids. And every time you're using AI, you need to understand that what you're doing is you're doing an amplification of speed, of scale, and of spectrum of impact. So these are the three S's that AI is usually impacting. Let's look at a couple examples of that in the next slide. So if you look at the areas that are most impacted by AI today, you'll see that most retailers have used some form of AI in digital marketing and in their CRM. So basically, they've used predictive models to understand and try to predict behavior of consumers. They've used machine learning to classify their consumers based on not only their demographics, but also based on their purchasing behavior, so that they can be better classified and better catered to. But also we're seeing that retailers are starting to use AI in a much more tactical way. So for example, when it comes to high-end and high-value products, like in apparel, especially fashion and luxury fashion, people have used visual search, which of course is based on artificial vision and recognition of objects and being able to fit those objects to a particular customer's needs. And that requires AI. And the point I'm trying to make there is, again, as a leader, we shouldn't use AI as a gimmick. AI needs to be a tool that empowers us actually to solve problems that other technologies cannot solve, as opposed to we're doing AI because AI is the coolest thing we're doing today. So as we look to the future, next slide, what I believe, like the previous speakers have said, is that I don't believe that AI is perfect. And I don't believe that AI is not error prone, the opposite. The key thing for leaders to understand is actually that AI, just like any other decision assistance tool, is prone to errors, and you have to embrace that. So what we have to do as leaders is we have to embrace the fact that things are going to be imperfect, that predictions are going to be uncertain. And it's through that embracing of uncertainty and imperfection that we build the resilience in decision making. And resilience in decision making basically is your ability to make decisions that are fault tolerant. It doesn't mean that you have a system that allows you to avoid the error, but you have a system that does not totally collapse when an error is committed. So it contains the impact of the error. It also allows you a reasonably quick recovery from that error, so that ideally the impact of that error is not visible to your stakeholders, or is minimally impactful to your stakeholders. And the way you do that is two things. One, first, conversions. So conversions of AI with other technologies, so that we're not solely dependent on just one aspect of technology, which is AI. But more importantly, we're seeing a significant pendulum swing to leaders coming back to becoming more human-centric, and coming back to be more nature-centric, and trying to achieve a balance between how do we achieve profits versus how we take care of the people and how we take care of the environment in which we operate. If we move to the next slide, I just want to summarize a few parting thoughts that I want to share with you guys. One, I want to start with a couple of observations we've seen throughout the different AI engagements that we've worked with our clients, in terms of what are the challenges of adoption of AI in terms of supporting the decision-making within leadership. And there's really three in our opinion. First, we've seen that some of the leaders are still trying to implement AI with the same old mindset, a mindset that confuses AI with decision automation. They're related, but they're not the same. Decision automation is about finding out a system for making decisions, for example, about financial budgeting, and then you automate it so that you take the redundancy of manual work, take that away from your people and free them to do higher value. But that's not AI. AI is actually being able to use a higher level intelligence beyond just automation, so that you can augment actually the cognitive capabilities of the leader who's making the decisions. We're also seeing that some leaders mistakenly think that AI is a substitute for the human touch, and far from it. We believe A in AI for us is not for artificial, but actually for augmented. We really don't see the difference between AI and, for example, mechanical augmentation. People from the very beginning have used a simple tool like a lever to actually augment the muscle power that we have as human beings, as limited as it is, and augment it and multiply, use it as a multiplier of that force, so that actually we can move objects that normally we could not move just based on our muscle energy. And finally, in terms of the mindset, I think one of the key things is leaders tend to quickly get frustrated when their first AI attempts fail. And from our experience with our customers is early attempts may not be as satisfactory and may not be producing the results you want. But the key thing is to stick with it and actually think about this as an iterative process, where you do small iterations, you fail early, you fail at a smaller scale, so that you can get to the desired result faster at a larger scale. The second point I want to leave you with is, again, that AI requires new skill sets for our leaders. Leaders need to learn how to make decisions that are data-driven, as opposed to gut feel. I have an intuition about this because of the years of experience I've been a leader, and that's how I make decisions. It is much more enlightened for us as leaders to actually have data support and back the decisions we make, so that they're not just from gut feel, but there's validation from data as well. And also just understand that there is a fundamental shift that's happening as we move to AI, which is we move away from the the deterministic decision making that we've all been trained for, whether academically or in the corporate world, to a world that we're very poorly prepared for, which is the probabilistic world, a world that's driven mostly by statistics and outcomes that are driven about there is a probability of X% that something is likely to happen. So you're talking about likelihoods as opposed to certainties. And that's something that mostly...
Great, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ali, for sharing your practical experience and expertise. I would like to skim quickly through the question from the audience. Please, we have one question. How can AI work with sales or create sales? Just a short, crisp answer, Ali.
I think, again, AI for sales should be used as an ally. So an ally that allows you to focus on who do you sell to and what do you need to prepare to make sure you have a better offer to the person you're selling to. And there's plenty actual solutions for that. The best example in retail is a recommendation engine that recommends the best next offer or the next discount or product.
Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. There were some questions. Please reach out to Ali. It was great having you with us from Morocco. And I really hope to stay in touch in the future and have more exchanges together. Thanks a lot, Ali.
Thank you.
Now, let's listen into our next panel discussion chaired by Tom Allen about aligning leadership with increasingly smart technology. Most of you already know that Tom recently joined SwissCognitive as facilitator and panel chair and supports our team with his amazing talent, unlocking the potential of every panel discussion, captivating the audience. Tom, you are the founder of the AI Journal, a free open source information hub on AI and emerging technologies. You have a passion for providing tools and resources to educate people on these topics covered on the AI Journal and provide the audience with an engaged platform to help them. With you on the panel, it's my great pleasure to welcome Parul, Peter, Parinas, and Aruna. Parul, you are a well-regarded thought leader in financial technology, advising UK HMRC's InsurTech boards, FinTech Delivery Panel, and major of London's International Business Programme in promoting open innovation, financial inclusion, and digital acceleration within financial services. You frequently featured in most influential women European InsurTech and are a speaker, blogger, and co-author on the AI book. An economist and CFA charter holder, you are a member executive committee at AXA, Excel Europe, and APAC, and have held senior strategies, M&As, and investor roles globally at AXA, Aviva, family offices, VCs, and Citigroup. Further, we have Peter with us. Peter, you have a vast experience of 20 years in leadership development and executive education across private, public, and non-profit sectors. Partners with organizations on leadership development strategies that are globally accessible and locally applicable. You create safe space for learning and brave space for experimenting with leadership in transformative ways. At GCSP, you have developed a dialogue through education approach. I'm curious about that. Additionally, I'm welcoming Parinas. You are a senior consultant at Trivadis, a part of Accenture, consulting businesses in applying machine learning, big data, and advanced analytics. You have led multiple data science teams in both research and industries environments, have implemented several diverse custom AI analytics solutions for companies in Germany and Switzerland. And finally, it's my great pleasure to welcome on this panel Aruna from Australia. Thanks for getting up for us, Aruna. We do very much appreciate. Aruna, you had the AI and data science practice at HCL Technologies for Asia Pacific and Middle East region based in Sydney. You have spent last 21 years delivering high-impact data analytics solutions primarily in financial services sector. Your current focus is on how to use AI and data science at scale in order to solve business challenges. You regularly share informative blogs, storytelling videos, etc., aimed at demystifying AI and detailing the ever-expanding AI scope for business transformation. Dear audience, feel free to follow our panelists on their social media. And now, dear Tom, it's my pleasure to hand over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Dalith. Thank you for having us, and thank you to the audience. And great to be here with Parul, Peter, Paranaz, and Aruna. Some really exciting topics. We're just having a conversation beforehand on all the interesting questions we're going to be touching on today to give you some great insight to take away. So I'm conscious of time, and I really want to get into it because everyone here I know has some great experience and great takeaways to help you today. So Parul, I want to kick things off by coming to you. And this will tie nicely into the conversation for later and give the audience some context on how AI works and the considerations for leadership. And it's quite a simple question, but with some great answers, I'm sure. What are some interesting use cases of AI in the insurance industry?
Thank you, Tom. So insurance is the original data company. What we do is we use data about individuals and companies and their properties and price it into a premium, which can be shared over a large number of people, and we provide a safety net. And in this original data work that we do, AI has really turbocharged our ability to understand multiplicity data. And where are we using it? We are using it in guided conversation and conversational AI through chatbots in customer queries. We're using it in dynamic pricing, where we get data from, say, telematics data from cars and are able to price insurance for car owners of a possible accident or any possible changes that would require for an claim to be paid. And then we are also seeing application in claim processing, where we review, investigate any claims. Also, we are using computer vision so that we can recognize accident images and estimate repair costs in real time. So that's been super, super helpful and really has reduced the cycle time by drastically. And finally, we use affective computing or emotion AI to understand customers better so that we can take actions according to their mental states. This also means that we can use voice analytics to ensure that we don't have a fraudulent claim, because there are certain markers to a fraudulent claim which can be detected through affective computing. So these are some of the really interesting use cases within insurance.
Awesome. And it's lovely to see that. It's a way of looking at it for insurance. I always say insurance is one of those key things in life that you're going to have to deal with, whether it's your house, your car, your holiday, your travel, whatever aspect it touches on. And it's really interesting to see what the behind the scenes are that you just explained, Parul. And it's similar to what I want to come to Aruna with as well. So Parul's just made some fantastic points around use cases in insurance and how to use these technologies. And we've done a report around fintech and insurtech, an area I'm obsessed with at the moment. Very cool area. And Parul's just kind of highlighted that. And I'd be keen to know, Aruna, what the kind of interesting use cases are for AI in banking, to give some context to this conversation.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Thanks for the question. It's great to be here with all the great panel members, and thanks for the invitation. So having worked in banking for 20 years, I can see a lot of interesting use cases. I'll start off with credit risk. So traditionally, when someone wants to buy a loan, we look at their income, their account history, and their repayments. But not everybody has got an account history. You know, people who are newly migrating or entering into the workforce. So this is where we use ML algorithms. We can actually look into the digital footprint. We can look at their social media data. We can look at their browsing behavior in order to create a complete credit profile of the consumer. This way, we are able to service to all sections of the society and still reduce the risks of the loan. The second use case I can think of is fraud. So traditionally, we use rule-based methods to detect fraud. With the digitization, more and more services are going online, which means more channels for fraudsters as well. Now, using AI and ML, we can analyze each and every individual's consumer behavior as opposed to the normal consumer behavior and look for anomalies. And all of this can be done in real time. The third most important use case for me personally, though, is the data protection and privacy. As you know, banks have got a lot of data. They can have personal and sensitive information. So we use ML algorithms to actually sniff through the data within the systems and identify where the sensitive data is there, how it's been stored, it's been encrypted or not, and make the necessary changes. So these are some of the typical use cases, but using more and more sophisticated algorithms to address the problems.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point there that I picked up on, Aruna, which was looking at knowing your customer and understanding the security behind it, right? Because that's what we always want to make sure we've got when we use these new technologies. I know, Parul, you've talked about it before, and looking at the kind of cybersecurity that goes on behind it and the ethics, which we'll touch on later today. And really interesting to know that's the key kind of pusher behind the banking industry. So, Paranaz, I want to come to you now, and I want to kind of switch it up a little bit and look at, obviously, this panel's around leadership and this whole conference around leadership. And I'm aware that some of us might not feel that AI will likely affect business practices in the future across the C-suite. And I'm interested to know, what would you outline, or are there key tactics you think that C-suite executives can use to reshape their divisions? So, looking at the technologies that Parul and Aruna just well mentioned, how can we reshape those divisions?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tom. Well, the thing is, I think in future and almost today, AI has become one of the co-workers of every leader. And I think it is very crucial for every leader to get to know what are the potentials of using AI solutions, and more importantly, getting to know what are the limitations of using AI solutions, and not expecting too much like a science fiction novel from the technology that we have today. Yeah. The other thing is, I think it is very crucial for leaders to actually determine that they want to actually create solutions that are actually needs driven, but not actually technology focused and technology driven, simply because technology has become a hype, but this should actually come from within the organization and a crucial need that people are facing. Yeah. The other thing is, I think for leaders to stay relevant for their organizations, it is actually very important to determine that there should be this human entity to each leader's character, and so that they could actually build trust within their organizations, so that when they are actually saying, okay, we are going with a particular AI solution, they could actually get the support that they crave to push the solution forward. Yeah. Tactic that they could actually focus on is to study the side effects that implementing AI solutions might have for their organization. Basically, a lot of people are going to automation and then reversing back because they didn't expect actually a lot of challenges that it has brought for their organization. And it is very important that we study within our organization what is the unique footprint that we want to actually create with our AI solutions within our organization.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Paranaz, because looking at it when we speak to companies, and for anyone out there that follows AI Journal, when we look at things that we do, it's very interesting to me that people don't have the step-by-step frameworks or where they actually want to go, or the roadmap, or what they want to achieve. And it's more like, well, we'll use this fancy technology, we'll use RPA, we'll use intelligent automation. It fixes now, but it doesn't look far ahead, which I think why this panel is so great. And Peter, it makes me want to come to you with a real great question on getting a definition or a way to understand leadership. So we hear the word leadership a lot, and like Paranaz has talked about just then, looking at the kind of models and the frameworks and outlines and tactics, we hear the word leadership, but what do we actually mean? What does the word leadership mean?
Yeah, thanks very much, Tom, and thanks to you and Dalit and Livia for allowing us to join you today, and to my fellow panelists. Yeah, look, I think in the English language we use the word leadership somewhat lazily, and it behoves us to step back and maybe think a little bit about what we mean when we use that word, because I think we can mean many different things in different conversations at different times. Sometimes when talking to each other, in fact, we may be talking about different ideas of leadership when we're discussing the subject. I think it's important to recognize that it isn't a discipline yet. It's not understood or studied well enough to be really, I think, defined as a clear discipline. What it is, it's a cultural phenomenon, right? It's a way that people self-organize. What leadership is also it's an expression of power. Now, not to get too philosophical, but it's also an expression of love. And I think that if you ask a lot of people who have very senior positions of authority, who have been in a role of a leader under very difficult circumstances, they will talk about the power of love and the reasons why they stay engaged. And those two phenomena are definitely there. So I think in the AI context, it's interesting to think about, as AI increases in its power and its influence, where does that leave the love dynamic of leadership? So not to get too philosophical, but I do think it's a question that is worth stopping and spending a little bit more time on. It's also, I think, helpful to separate out into a couple of different layers what we're talking about. Sometimes we're talking about an individual and their characteristics, what we expect from a person who's leading us. What we expect from ourselves as leaders, our characteristics, our skills, our capabilities, the way we think, etc. So there's an individual element to this. There's also a group element in a team context. When we're working together with others in a community or in an organization, what does leadership mean when it comes to shared practices, when it comes to accountability to each other? You lift it out of the individual only. Then a strategic organizational level. What do we mean by leadership when it comes to setting and some kind of shared direction, some kind of shared working across a larger system when a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, a lot of different interests? What does leadership mean in that context? And lastly, I think the societal level, right? When we say, what does leadership mean in the context of artificial intelligence, but the broadest sense? What is our role? What is our leadership role as leaders working in this field? So I think it's important to separate those four levels. You could engage deeply on each of those four, but a good starting point is recognizing when you're talking at cross purposes, right? I'm talking about societal leadership and change, and you're talking about the skills that you have as an individual. We need to recognize when we're having a cross conversation. And lastly, I think it's also useful to recognize that the word leadership can be off-putting to some people. In fact, in my own work at GCSP, some of the most incredible leaders that I've seen, people who have incredible impact through their work, through their organizations, or through just who they are and how they engage in their communities. They actually find the word leader not necessarily, they wouldn't see themselves as leaders. They wouldn't describe themselves in that way, in fact, but it's what they do in practice. And so I think there's an interesting dynamic to think about as we think about representing the whole of society in AI. Is the word leader can actually be off-putting to some incredible leaders. What does that mean?
And I think that's a really interesting point, because if you look at it, Peter, when the classic saying, the person that says they're everything is least far from it. So the person that says, I'm not the leader, I'm not the leader, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, they probably more likely are, because they don't even want to take acknowledgement for it. They're just doing it off a basis of doing it for the right reason, which I think is great. And I'd love to know, I mean, this conversation could go, you made some great points, and I encourage everyone in the audience to reach out, and maybe this will be a round two where we can all come back and look at these points, because I'm sure everyone else on the panel will have some input here. But Parul, I want to come to you, and taking that on board from Peter, looking at the use cases discussed in insurance, and Paranaz and Aruna have done fantastic points at pointing out how AI can help leaders and what it can allow leaders in departments or business managers, such as insurance, that need to be doing. And keen to know more about the technical side. So what are the bottlenecks to greater adoption of technologies like machine learning in the insurance value chain?
I think one of the things that Peter touched upon, and I think was mentioned by Parinaz as well, is the lack of leadership or management buy-in, which tends to hamper a lot of AI adoption. As Parinaz mentioned, there's a lot of innovation theater that goes on. So people believe that it's a PR tool, using AI as a PR tool, and that it does not have strategic benefit. So the lack of strategic approach to AI adoption is a major barrier to entry in our industry. The next barrier to entry is the lack of talent. So we have actuaries who have been manipulating data for a very long time, but what we do lack is the same actuaries having ability to do automated statistical analysis, knowing the programming techniques to capture, reorganize large volumes of data, and actually test and learn, because we tend to be very bought in by claims-led pricing model, and alternate data sets tend to be used in almost cosmetic manners rather than integrated intrinsically into our pricing decision on how we price a particular risk. And then the third one that we face is implementation. The integration of ML models into existing business applications such as underwriting, policy administration, claims management is exceedingly cumbersome, primarily because we sit on, in large insurance, a legacy spaghetti and data silos, which makes it really difficult to implement a seamless end-to-end ML model, which is actually driving some benefit and not just very cosmetic. And all this really drives a culture of resistance to change, because people think that it's too complex and the benefits are not apparent, and there is lack of management buy-in to actually have a holistic look at our value chain and say, okay, let's go with what are the best areas where we can drive maximum benefits. The culture therefore becomes more inertia ridden. Oh, we've all seen this before, it'll never catch on. So those are some of the things that seem to create barriers within insurance industry, in my mind.
Yeah, and just before I come to Aruna, would you say there's a skills gap in the insurance industry?
Oh, definitely, and also attractivity gap. So, or do we have interesting use cases to, or the infrastructure to attract the right data science talent? Yeah. I would say yes, we do.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm sure it'd be the same for every other industry that we're working in. I mean, Aruna, I'm going to come to you with this question, but I was looking and I've been reading, I think it was back in March and May, two separate reports, and one was from The Guardian and one was from the BBC, and just explained how much there is a digital skill shortage, whether it's in banking, insurance, education, or any other area, maybe oil and gas, or maybe it's something as crazy as healthcare, about where do we educate these people. And I'd love to know, Aruna, what should leaders do to manage this talent gap, as Parul's touched on and Peter was touching on earlier? What's the kind of, is there a framework, or what can they do to get over this talent gap?
Thanks. That's a really good question, Tom. I've seen organizations who have made huge investments in infrastructure and technology only to realize that they don't have the people skills to actually drive value from them. And it's a huge problem for the managers. I see two types of skill. The first type is the technical, who actually design and build the AI solutions. And the other one is the business people who use it. Now, we need to make sure the skill gap in both the areas get addressed. Now, how do we go about addressing the talent gap? I would say, look internally first, look at the internal resources and, cover all parts of the organization. I will start off with identifying the AI thought leaders for each business area, so they can, generate awareness and interest in AI and, identify AI enthusiasts and come up with a training program that's more appropriate for that business area. The next one, I would say, retraining and upskilling. Don't focus only on the technical skills. Look at skills that requires, creativity and criticality on AI, so that they can drive innovations and come up with new applications.
Yeah.
The third one I would say is establish innovation labs and internal conferences so we can generate interest and curiosity. We can also showcase how AI can solve business problems and drive value. And another way I would say is, break down the skills into various roles. For example, if you're looking for a unicorn data scientist, probably go and build a team of technical specialists who can work together and complement each other. Once you've exhausted the internal options, of course, you can go externally, go directly and hire. Or there is a lot of young talent out there with fresh ideas and perspectives. Or there's also partners and consulting firms who can actually provide the experienced talent pool. So it's just you need to know where you are in the journey and then plan accordingly.
Yeah, I love that you said that because it's such a important. It's my passion, Aruna. It's my passion to educate people and make it accessible on these kind of technologies. And I'm sure I could bite everyone's ear off here about how passionate I am. Might not know much about AI, but I love to educate people because ultimately it's people that drive change, and it's making sure those frameworks are in place. And it makes me
Just
really.
one thing. That's exactly it. So there were so many videos I generate and put it in the YouTube. It's just because primarily that, and you need to also educate the executives, not only the, they are the leaders and they need to be educated and aware on this.
Exactly. Like one of my friends was telling me, Steve Swire is saying, life's just a constant learning model. So just keep educating yourself and keep learning. And it's great that you've got that mindset. So I want to come to you, Peter. And Aruna's just made some great points. And looking at AI and leadership and considering the points we've made so far, what needs to be considered in terms of learning, unlearning, and relearning?
Yeah, so thanks for separating those three out. In fact, because I think it's worth the differentiation. So, I think in the program for this event today, it was mentioned, what worked in the past won't always work in the future. So when we're talking about leadership, we're clearly talking about a need for learning, human learning, alongside machine learning development. And actually, there was a McKinsey report that came out. I was just reading it on public transport this morning, in fact, that came out on the future of work and looking at some of the core capabilities that they predict we will need. It's on the World Economic Forum site, and they've categorized them in 4 areas: so cognitive, interpersonal, self-leadership, and digital. And they so far suggest that in 2 areas in particular, there are gaps right now. And the 2 areas are highlighted in the digital side and on the cognitive side. And I want to focus on the cognitive side because they talk about the communication and planning of work gaps. And more specifically, I think they break that down. And I'm just quoting off because I think it's really current and relevant. This ability to ask the right questions and to tell the right stories on the one hand. And on the second hand, this ability to think agile thinking, and the ability to learn is on there. Identified as current gaps across the 52 or 56, I think, capabilities they've identified to keep up with and to move us forward when it comes to merging humanity and AI technology. So I think there's more there to be studied. But just very briefly on the learning, unlearning, and relearning, I think there is lots to be learned, and there is obviously some examples there. There are maybe also some things that we need to let go of.
Yeah.
The hero model of leadership, where there's an individual that leads from the front, waving the sword, is probably one of the most culturally embedded ways of thinking about leadership around the world today. The problem is that it makes it very hard for those people to keep up. If they have to make all the decisions, if they have to be the savior, if they are the person who has to be accountable for everything happening, the risks that come with that, we're seeing some wonderfully unfortunate examples of how that isn't working in today's world, particularly the last year and a half. Can we disseminate some of that decision-making capability? It's very hard to do. It's hard to suggest, but I think we need to expand a little bit beyond this individual leadership context to what does leadership mean in a much more of a shared. The Center for Creative Leadership is an organization who did a wonderful framework for this, which is this idea of leadership is about achieving outcomes. And to do that, you need a certain amount of direction, a certain amount of alignment, and a certain amount of commitment. And there are many ways you can achieve those three, but you always need to see those three. And I think it's a really useful framework to help us unlearn our part of the hero model that we have relied on for so long now. It's not to say we should throw it out, but I think we can move beyond it also.
Yeah. You can't be a leader in everything, right? So I wouldn't be a leader in one part and someone else wouldn't be a leader in everything. And I think it's the classic, if you go to a pub or you go out and you go out for a meal and you come across a know-it-all, you instantly think, well, you're clearly not a know-it-all, because how can you be a leader in this? How can you be that? How can you be there? And I think it's a great point you made, Peter, with unlearning and learning. And I want to come to you, Paranaz, with the question around technologies facilitating building ML models, and what are the challenges and dangers that leaders are facing? Because Peter's touched on it, Parul's touched on it, and Arun has touched on it, that we've clearly got a bit of a theme here. It's educating people and making up for those skills gaps. So I'd love to know what your challenges and dangers are that leaders are currently facing, please.
Yeah, that's actually very, very relevant points that all of the panelists actually brought up so far. The lack of education, this gap in between business understanding and the technology understanding. And one of these very important challenges that I actually see is very common in between all of the people that I so far consulted with is that there is a lack of trying maybe in understanding how to interpret the solutions that are presented to them by the AI. You know, now there's this fascinating technologies enable you to drag and drop a couple of algorithms, put them together and give you the illusion that you build an AI, and maybe you did, but it is actually often get missed as a point that we are actually feeding data into this algorithm, and how we are actually, what is the input that we are giving, and what is the interpretation of the metrics that we are actually receiving, what these numbers actually mean, is actually really trying for many people to understand. And I think if we manage to get past this barrier of education for the business side and the technology side, we would actually enable our leaders to actually ask critical questions, because then it brings me to the second challenge. Unlike what Parul is actually facing with the leaders not actually being aware of the strategic importance of the solutions, maybe most of the in other industries that I actually worked with, people are aware that it is actually a phenomenon and it could actually help them. Yeah. But the challenge for them is to recognize how it could help their specific business, how their unique construction can actually benefit from this AI solutions and amazing solutions out there. And they need to understand that their unique data, their asset, which is their unique data, the level of granularity of their data, how clean it is, what kind of patterns are there, what are the features that are within this data, would actually enable even different use cases and solutions for their organization, even within the similar domains. So it's actually a matter of really educating ourselves and leaders about the capabilities of AI.
Yeah, love it. And educating is exactly what we want. And it's a shame we don't have more time today, because I'd love to keep educating the audience on the points that we've made. I do have several more questions that we can look through for after this presentation and after this panel we've got on today, and to share it with the audience that are joining us. And just quickly before we go, I'd love to just know from each of you just a quick key point on what you might want to leave the audience with within 10, 20 seconds, a key question or a key point to think about leadership. Maybe Parul, we can start with you and then go around quickly.
Yeah, I think the key point to the leadership agility in adopting AI is to be open-minded. Yeah. And think about it as a tool to assist and make life easier rather than a threat to your value chain. So it's accretive.
Love it. And then Aruna?
I'll keep it short. I'll say, look at the human side of it. there's AI technology can do everything, but humans need to be there to actually enable it.
Yeah, love it. And Paranaz?
I would say actually knowing the true potential and also the limitations of AI is actually enable us to then develop responsible solutions and which are also efficient. So I would say let's get to know AI as it really is, not the way we would wish it to be.
Yeah, music to my ears. And Peter?
Look, I think that the AI community is a powerful force in the coming years, and with that comes some responsibility to not make it a cliche. And I think if you can learn to build trust, if you can ask yourself about across all your different stakeholders, is what we're going to do here going to increase trust or decrease trust at a time where trust has never been more important to focus on? So that would be the parting message: is ask yourself, is this going to increase or is this going to decrease trust with all of our stakeholders?
Yeah,
thank you.
Awesome, love it. And I mean, I would encourage anyone that's watching to go out and connect with everyone here, with Paranaz, Peter, Runa, and Parul, all great people that have obviously shared great insight, and I could talk for ages, but our time's up, and hopefully we get to do this again soon. And thank you to Dalith and Andy for having us on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to all of you. So much to share, discuss, and brainstorm about. I mean, I'm keeping saying the same things again and again, and this is probably the reason why we're having so many of these cognitive virtuals to share and get together. Thank you, Tom, for your passionate way of moderating such a panel and engaging your panelists. I just love it. Thank you, Parul, Peter, Parinaz, and Aruna for enriching this event with your views. We had here like from Australia to Ireland, Germany and Switzerland, and this is phenomenal. Stay healthy, enjoy your summer. At least Aruna, you have somehow not a summer, but nevertheless. Now we have a very special guest actually too, and we are challenging ourselves with technology because now technology will need to run all by itself. Why? Now it's my great pleasure to invite my co-founder, Andy, on stage, and with him, our special guest and world-known British skipper, Alex Thompson. The two will discuss about racing across oceans and navigating a new world of AI. Hi, Alex. So great to see you.
Hi.
Alex, you belong to one of the global best-known skippers. You have broken multiple records, achieved countless accolades, and continued to cement your reputation as one of the world's most talented offshore sailors. The youngest skipper ever to win a round-the-world yacht race. You also hold the British solo unassisted round-the-world monohull record, which you set in 2017 when you finished the grueling Vendée Globe, the Everest of sailing, in just 74 days, 19 hours, and 35 minutes. This is amazing. It's a very long time, although I know it was very fast. Alex, you will be interviewed by my co-founder, Andy, who recently joined your team as an advisor with his vast technology experience. Now, I mentioned Andy and I, will challenge ourselves now because technology will need to run by itself, because Andy will come on stage. He is normally behind the scene making everything run. So now let me introduce Andy. He is a digital cognitive strategist, top global AI and digital transformation advisor for startups and enterprises, boards, tactical leader, and an AI influencer. And those who know Andy already also know that in addition to his passion for AI and SwissCognitive, Andy is also an adventure skipper for whom the challenge of the oceans and the wind cannot be extreme enough. He holds one of the highest sailor certificates in the world. Sailing in the ocean is where Andy finds the balance for his head and soul. Now, Alex and Andy, you are the perfect match to discuss an app which can also sail, or actually racing across the oceans and navigating a new world of AI. Guys, the stage is all yours.
Hi, Alex. It's my pleasure to have you here. Alex, very cool to have you with us today. A&A, or Alex and AI. I'm really curious. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and I'm really looking forward to have a discussion with you. Alex, it looks like you may be in a cockpit of a fighter jet, but I think you are in the cockpit of your racing yacht Hugobus in Gosport in the South England. Can you briefly tell us a little about of the incredible boat that you're sitting in and the race it's designed for, Alex?
Yeah, I can. Thanks, Andy. And hi, everybody. Well, as Andy said, this is the cockpit of Hugo Boss. And this boat is designed for one purpose, to go out and win a single-handed round the world yacht race. The race is called the Vendée Globe. And very simply, it's a simple race with a simple course and simple rules. The course is easy because it starts in France, just north of La Rochelle. And you come out of France, you hang a left down the bottom, left at Africa, around Antarctica, left at America, and back to France again. So it's about 26,000 miles. It takes about 3 months. 30 teams do it. And the rules are very simple. You must take everything with you. If you take anything on board the boat after the start, you are disqualified. And if you step foot on dry land, you're also disqualified. So because of this, statistically, only 50% of the people who start will finish. And to my mind, it's the single most difficult sporting challenge left in the planet today.
Now, Alex, we have a topic today, leadership. What if AI makes more decisions? Your boat is full of data. Your boat is a data machine, sort of an app with sails, isn't it? You trim and navigate, optimize yourself and your boat with technology, several videos, cameras, or are your eyes. You can't see out without them. Alex, please be honest. Who do you believe more? Your monitors or yourself, your experience, your instinct? Please give you some insights, Alex.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's we started on this journey 4 years ago with Nokia Bell Labs, and they were trying to help us win the race, but their way to help us was to try and make me connected to the machine. So try and get the two of us together in perfect synergy. So the idea was to use technology to try and take some of the mundane tasks away from me. And I'll tell you, Andy, at the beginning, it was very uncomfortable. We were developing a pilot that had some anticipation, that could foresee what was happening. And of course, the only way to test it properly was on the ocean. And so we'd start testing it, we'd turn it on, and there were all sorts of problems to begin with. In fact, it was known on our team, we called it death by autopilot. But over time, we were able to communicate with the engineers at Nokia Bell Labs, give them immediate feedback, we get new code back, and over time, we became to trust it as if it was a crew member. In fact, better than a crew member, because I don't have to pay him, I don't have to be nice to him, and he doesn't have to eat all my food. So it's amazing how quickly we've become comfortable.
That must be a journey for you, isn't it, Alex? You're crazy. I mean, you're sailing so far away from any civilization. Even the ISS up in space is closer to us than you to some places in the world. So I think that's crazy. And not only this, it's around 70 kilometers per hour storms and 80 days alone there. I mean, and lots of constant and data connection to your team on land side. But what a contrast to the past, where you navigate by sextants, by stars and moons and so on. Alex, tell us, lead us, what technology has changed about you as a skipper. So I learned to be always honest with technology. How has this changed?
Well, for me, the benefit with these boats now is to try and make the human do more. We are the limiting factor on board these boats because there's only one person to navigate, to take any medical things, to do the media, to drive the boat, to trim the sails, to eat, to sleep, maintenance. There is too many things to do, and so the main way things have changed here is by sucking up some of those jobs, some of the alarm systems, trying to make them simple, trying to augment them so they're actually part of my mind, really. So it's changed immeasurably. And I think the only limitation is our imagination and time. That is all. I could say in the next 4 or 5 years, I could almost sail. I could use video cameras to tell me when the sails are trimmed perfectly. I could drive the boat for a few minutes while the machine learning is learning how I drive, and I push a button and it replicates my driving. And I think what's amazing is that some of these technology may cross over into industrial applications. One of the things we were trying to work with managing me was how can I sleep? How can I manage my sleep better? So we have a sensing system that gives me the information that I need to help me manage myself.
I think even more interesting than sleep is how you go and prepare yourself in the bathroom. I mean, it's shaky, it's loud, it's enormous pressure on you. Don't do any mistake out there. You are so far 7,500 k's between New Zealand and Chile. How you do this on your boat? Share a bit about your insights there.
Well, so on a boat, you really don't have any time on one of these races. So you sleep for 20 to 40 minutes every 2 to 4 hours. So you're catnapping all the time. And as I said, one of the hardest things when you sleep like that is you get so sleep deprived, you don't actually know where you've been to sleep or not. And actually, one of the hardest projects we took on with Nokia Bell Labs was to measure exactly how much sleep I had. So we had to measure the accelerations of the boat, measure the accelerations of me, combine them with heart rate, and look at the differences. And that was such a big step for me to be able to see exactly how much sleep I was getting. In terms of the other basics.
What was the biggest outtake to have this information first time, how you heartbeat is, pressure? What was your first learning out of it?
Well, as soon as you understand how much sleep you are getting, you are able to manage yourself. And it's not, sleep over one day. We're looking at sleep over a week or even longer. So I can see over time that I'm not getting enough sleep, and once I have that knowledge, then I'm able to prioritize that, because ultimately, if I'm super tired, I'll be making bad decisions. And unfortunately, in my role, in my job, a bad decision can be pretty dangerous. As far as toilets go, I can tell you that technology on toilets is extreme, Andy. So prepare yourself. Toilets are very heavy, so we developed a carbon fiber toilet. I can tell you it's molded to the exact contours of my backside. And it's extremely strong, very light, and it's never broken down, Andy.
Alex, give me an insight. What's the arrow here? What's this pink arrow on the toilet?
We were talking about it earlier, actually, because it's not so smart when your boat is black with bare carbon and then you make a black toilet. When you need to go, you can't find it, Andy. So the pink arrows just point where it is.
God. Okay, that's funny. So just we have off script, doesn't matter. Just give me some insight. You mentioned it. You have to trust, and especially if you are so tired, And we learned as a skipper, you have to be with a plan B. But how can be if you are so far, if you are rely on technology, you are must be very risky, isn't it?
Well, that it's probably the biggest problem, and something we work really hard to avoid is that the feeling is we think we can do lots, and the reality is you're much better to do less better. So don't take on too much. And you know, for us, the future technology is limitless, absolutely limitless. So when we look, we put in for the technology, we decide, we make an agreement when we'll stop developing it. And if we have any concerns around the software, then we'll take a backup on the boat that's maybe maybe not as functional, but safer and a more reliable. Because when I'm out there in the ocean, I'm not even allowed to be sent any code. I have to do it all myself. So we look at a contingency, and then we'll look at a contingency to the contingency.
Perfect, perfect. Let's go a bit further to the question about training. So we used to have training in sports for ourselves to act with your gear, like here the boat. But you train actually the boat themselves, isn't it?
Well, we have to train it, and we have to develop. Well, she's a her. We call her a her in England. So yeah, we have to be super connected to it, and we have to train. And when we develop the kind of software that we use with the say with the fiber optics and the highly loaded parts, or in the autopilot software, we have to do it in real life, Andy. So it's pretty scary. And when we worked with Nokia Bell Labs, there were some raised eyebrows that we would be testing this in real life. But really, it was the only way to speed the process up, really engage the engineers, and to be able to get the work done.
So tell us, so you go on a daily or weekly base, you go on ocean, on the English Channel to speed up all this technology to be in a race at the first time. So how this works? So you bringing back the data, or is this on board, this technology?
Well, yeah, we don't just go to the English Channel. Sometimes we'll do a transatlantic, Andy, to test the stuff. And now the connection on board with the satellites is so much better and so much more reliable than it has been. And it's about to get an awful lot better. So we're able to send data back. We're able to send little bits back live, and then we can send back. I mean, we've got nearly 300 sensors on this boat. So once we'll do a training session, we wrap the data up, we send it off, and then we wait for the feedback.
Oh, cool. So the last section is what will the future look like in sports, but especially here in sailing. You give us some insights how this would look like in 5 or 10 years, or even your next boat.
Yeah, yes. Well, the biggest change, I think, Andy, is connection. You know, people think this is about sailing, but really it isn't about sailing. Racing the Vendée Globe, it's about human endeavor. It's about adventure. It's about man or woman versus the elements. And by the way, women and men in this sport are completely equal. And so the biggest change I'd like to see, Andy, is I want to bring the fans inside the boat. I want them to feel what it's like. I want them to feel the accelerations, the deaccelerations. We want to bring them inside here to get a sense of really what human endeavor feels like.
I think this answer now it's come. Mike has a question to you. Mike, with the complexity and the boat technology, do you think human will there be more unmanned AI-assisted boat racing?
Well, we consider ourselves that we already are an AI-assisted boat, and we could go an awful lot further. But the great thing about this sport, Andy, is it's pure. You really are not allowed any outside assistance. So we can develop anything we want before the race, as long as it's on board, we can take it. So why don't I take a virtual owl with me? virtual Alex can sail with me. He can tell me what I need to do. He can coach me all the way through it. It's a limitless. We're just limited by our imagination.
Alex, it was our great pleasure to have you. We feel here in the studio that you are there not only in the boat, it's your environment, that you grow over yourself, and you have to, because you are crazy, going out and around the globe and coming back healthy and with the whole boat is nothing that you can have for free. There's nothing like a free lunch, isn't it? So Alex, say goodbye to our audience, and we will happy to see you again, but once on an ocean, directly connected to our studio, isn't it? So Alex, best thing.
Yeah, thank you everybody, and thanks for watching. Ciao, ciao.
Okay, Dalit, come on.
Thanks also from my side, Alex. It was very insightful, very interesting. And I must say, I was really sweating now for the last few minutes. And you can imagine why. Oh, yeah, thanks.
You wanted to use my toilet, didn't you?
You know what I like most in your toilet? It's actually the pink air, because pink is my color. But anyway, the reason why I was just sweating, just to let you guys know, I mean, you know me sweating here if technology doesn't work. Now I felt how much more you sweat backstage if technology might not work and you have no clue what to do. Okay. Normally, or not actually normally, every time Andy is backstage and actually make the whole thing run, as you, Alex, is running the boat. Okay, I'm here, but now I had to go backstage while he was here, and I was just thinking of, please, technology, just for once, remain with me and don't make me angry. So I'm very happy to be back with no interference and no problems. So we can't direct the wind, but we can adjust the sails. Dear audience, I hope you all enjoyed this session like I did. Thanks, Alex, for sharing your unique experience and new aspects with us. And thank you, Andy, for making this interview happen. Without you guys, we wouldn't have the chance. We may have questions now. No, sorry, the question I actually gave already to Andy. So now we wish your team much joy and success in the upcoming races. May AI give you a great advantage. Now I would like, thank you too, and see you soon, Alex. Gearing up for the future of business. This is the topic of our next panel discussion, chaired by Andreas Liebel. Andreas, you are Managing Director of Unternehmertum and responsible for the Applied AI Initiative. With 50 partners, the initiative is driving the adoption of AI in Germany. You serve as expert regarding innovation and commercialization in the global partnership on AI next to other advisor roles. Before joining Unternehmertum, you worked for McKinsey for 5 years and did your PhD at the Technical University of Munich. With you on the panel, we have Anand. You are the global AI leader of PwC and a partner that leads the AI and Emerging Technology Group for the US firm. Having worked with business and AI technology across 4 continents, you bring a passion for technology that is relevant for the business and is also socially responsible. You have co-edited 4 books and written over 50 technical papers and are equally comfortable in the business, academic, or policy circles on the use and adoption of AI, what is definitely very valuable. Then we do have Pauline. You are a senior advisor at Ernst & Young. You have worked with some of the most recognized global fast-moving consumer good brands at Nestlé and Mondelez, and have international experience from Sweden, the UK, Denmark, Indonesia, Germany, and even Switzerland. You currently sit on the boards of Swedish Match AB, Duni AB in Sweden, and Kissen, Europe in Germany. Last but not least, we do have Dirk. You have a degree in software engineering as well as in business administration and economics from the University of Kiel in Germany. You worked for 20 years in different positions at BASF and Siemens. In 2013, you were named the first chief digital officer in the German DAX, one of the top 30 public listed companies. In September 2016, you joined Waker as CDO and CIO, heading the IT department and driving the digital transformation. And finally, we do have Avraham. You are the founder of Ask the CEO Media, where you help high-tech business get hard over the noise on social media, translating their corporate messages into language people understand, what I would call compiler. You have served over 100 organizations via your thought leader consulting practice. You are a top-ranked industry analyst and global expert in AI, IoT, cloud, cybersecurity, and emerging technologies, followed worldwide on Twitter, and a frequent speaker on leveraging technology to accelerate revenue growth. Avraham, I'm so glad we recently met virtually and that you agreed to contribute to our SwissCognitive community too. Dear Andreas, it's my great pleasure.
And I'm really happy to be here with this great panel. So we heard about the transformative force of AI and insights into leadership challenges. George Koolries actually talked about the fear of change, about leaders needing to be trust anchors, about AI being a leadership challenge. Yet in the next panel, we already touched upon the topic of competence at the board level. Ultimately, AI is not only a leadership topic, but also a topic for leaders, and that they need to understand and educate themselves. But it is also about adjusting the interpretation of their jobs to lead companies in the AI age. As an initiative for driving the adoption of AI in the industry, we at Applied AI actually found that many leaders do not understand the impact of AI on their job sufficiently. We therefore wrote this white paper here. It's called Artificial Intelligence for Boards, with more than 20 board members to really go through all board levels and describe how AI will affect their jobs. In the report, we start with a recent survey saying that about 70% of the surveyed company report minimal or no impact of AI. But what if AI isn't the problem? What if the problem is you as a board member? With the words of George Koolries at the beginning, ask yourself, did you leave this established path already? I'm very happy to have with Pauline and Dirk here, two panelists who contributed to the paper, and also with Anand and Avraham, two panelists who bring in new insights. And with that, I'm really now starting the discussion. And maybe Pauline, you as a board member of several in several supervisory boards, what is AI for you?
Yes, thank you very much, Andreas. So AI for me means simply digital transformation. And then, of course, you ask yourself, what is digital transformation? And for me, it is an organizational change through the use of digital technologies and business models to improve business of the performance of the business. And in fact, the major part of digital transformation actually fail to meet expectation. And why is that? Because this is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing leadership task, and it has to start from the top. For me, digital is just a tool. It's an enabler. And our role leading the business is still to drive growth, profit, and to increase market share. So the role for the boards, the role for me and all of us in the board is to ask for performance, ask for targets. Why are we doing this? What are the KPIs? We need to understand the best and the worst cases and scenarios, like many of us did during the corona. We need to understand the risks. We need to understand the competitive dynamics, the customer and consumer trends, and what resources are needed. What will be the return on investment? Because all in all, digital should support our overall strategy. That is what AI or digital transformation is for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe to follow up with you, how is, from your perspective, leadership changing this kind of fast-changing technological world?
Thank you, Andreas. So just following on from what Pauline was saying, sort of the comments on the board, let me take one level lower into the CEO, right? So in today's world, a leader, or I would say a CEO of an organization, really needs to be like an orchestra conductor, right? So what do I mean by that? So he or she needs to really bring the whole group together. If you look at an orchestra, there are 100 plus people. So think of the 100 plus top executives as your orchestra, and you need to bring that group together. And what do you need to do, right? So you need to listen to the distinct music, or I would say voices coming from the different groups, whether it's marketing, operations, technology, finance. Each one have their own KPIs, their own capabilities, their own mindsets. But you as a leader need to blend them into a very coherent strategy to take your organization forward. Create a harmony by blending the multiple specialized skills, right? So you have technologists, data scientists who claim they're very different to the software engineers, different to the marketers, right? So you need to bring together all of those, bring the ethics, bring the culture. And as a good conductor, having a great baton technique to direct string, percussion, and choir, to bring the best of the soloists as well as the group. So think of your organization as there are going to be some very high achievers as well as good teams. You need to bring both together and have them succeed. Very much you need to influence and persuade them. And so finally, I would say you need to be able to predict, or more accurately sense what is coming, so that you can change the tempo of the organization, to lead with compassion, to drive growth, profitability. It's all about the ethics and the broader sense of community and responsibility to the society. So I really see this as very much an orchestra conductor. The CEO should be like that, bringing everything together.
Which is actually very much a leadership role than that you just described. And I think that role really also has kind of these changes with AI. Avrom, what from your perspective, how will AI impact leadership in the future of work?
Yeah, sure. So in the future of work, the AI will impact leadership in terms of how we view and interact with data. If you think about it, we've got all these IoT devices out there and everything's collecting data. We've got so much data, we don't know what to do with that. And according to a recent study from Forrester commissioned by Dell Technologies, 71% of businesses are gathering data faster than they can use it. And 66% of businesses say they constantly need more data than their current capabilities provide. So you're collecting this data, you can't use it because you're overwhelmed, so then you think you'll solve the problem by collecting more data, but you don't know what to do with that data because you're all overwhelmed. And this is what they call the data paradox. So one of the things that are holding back businesses from being data ready is data silos. If you think about mergers and acquisitions, you've got all these different silos. Things things were being done for many years, and that's how it was done. IoT sensor data was collected to be used just for its own specific function, make sure IoT is working. Customer usage data was used for personalization, and pretty much every category of data was used for its own specific purpose, which is very limiting. And the thing is that data is very important. You need it to run your business, and by not having access to this kind of critical data, you're really leaving a lot on the table. Now, the interesting thing is the study shows that 13% of companies are taking full advantage of data at their disposal to become what Forrester calls data champions, which are businesses that have struck the right balance between leveraging the right technology, implementing the right processes in place, and the culture with regard to analyzing and storing that data, and then having the right skills on hand to actually make use of it all. I really love the way Anand kind of, summed that up as an orchestra conductor, because That's really what's needed from leadership. So it's that holistic approach to how we view data that's going to make a difference. So, you know, when we think about all the different AI tools coming out, there'll be a significant impact on leadership in terms of their business strategy. You know, what kind of employees they hire, what kinds of tools they purchase, what kinds of culture they want to cultivate and convey to their workforce. And, you know, a lot like what Pauline said, it has to start from the top. And this is what we're going to be seeing more of in the future of work.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's a perfect handover actually to Dirk, because we now talked a lot about data, and you are responsible for data at Wacker as CDO and CI. So how do you see the specific role of AI now coming in, and what the typical challenges are that you face in your job?
I mean, I like the analogies that was brought in by Anna, and also the importance of data that was mentioned before. So in my role, I'm really responsible to make it happen. So on the one hand side, I manage the traditional IT shop, and I manage the digitalization of a mid-sized chemical company as a global player. And one of the meanwhile most important instruments in our toolbox is really, or has become really, the topic of AI. In order to deal with this importance, I mean, the process industry, we have a lot of data. The machinery runs 7/24. We have a high degree of automation, and we have a lot of data. So in order to deal into these insights, one of the first steps whenever we look into a new area for digitalization is to start with a data strategy, to really understand what data we have already on hand, what data we need, and what kind of data is missing, and the consequence, where do we have to acquire data. And it might end up with additional IoT devices, with smart sensors, etc. On the other side, it's really to make also sure, besides the data strategy, that people, I mean, every single employee in the organization understands the value of data and the ownership of data. I mean, traditionally, while we talk about leadership, people are trained in order to be very restricted with data. This is very much coming from the personal data perspective. And now we have to open this perspective to make sure that people understand the value of data in a totally different sense. And AI is the tool set and the methodology to unlock the secret of this data. And this is very important in our digitalization approach at Wacker, and I see also in many other companies.
Thank you. Pauline, maybe you as a member of supervisory boards, you have an overview about the different roles in all these companies. So maybe from your perspective, what do you see as kind of typical mistakes people do when kind of tackling AI or trying to tackle AI?
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. Yeah, first, I have two examples. The first is the recruitment of the CDO, the Chief Digital Officer, who very often become a chief disconnected officer, then it becomes a chief depressed officer, and finally a chief departed officer. So how do we make sure that we make our CDO a chief delighted officer? So I would say very important is to build relation with the CSU team and ensure that he or she has the right resources in terms of people and budget. And what does we need to do in the board to ensure this? We have to have completely clarity when it comes to the roles versus other C-suites. What are the objectives? Well, how do we empower this position? Because this at the end is not a permanent role, it's a transition role. And the second mistake is to underestimate the culture transformation. We simply don't focus enough on the culture transformation. And what is then a culture? It's quite simple. Culture is a set of values and norms that guide human interaction. And most organizations consider culture as the key hurdle for digital transformation. So what do you need to do? You need to look at your core competencies. What do you value in the company? How do you work together? What is an accepted behavior and what is completely out of bounds? What makes people successful? Who to hire? Because strong culture is really difficult to change. Culture is somehow unconscious. To change, you need to undo things. And a good tip is to start with your front-end FTE. For example, those who are more customer-centric. Constantly measure and monitor. What is digital culture? How do you define it? I would say it's openness versus partner, to work in ecosystem. It's autonomy, risk-taking, it's speed, and it's to value collaboration rather than individual behavior. So a good checklist is to check your values and look, do you only focus on perfection or do you also look at speed? Do you lead your team or do you work with networking? Do you work with stability, make sure everyone is stable, or do you have this willingness to change? And finally, do you only look at specifying your targets, or do you also look at how do you inspire others? I would say those two are the most common mistakes, Andreas.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe handing over to Avram, maybe you have a best practice, a good example, or maybe also an example where exactly that happened and people had to look for it.
Sure. Thank you, Andreas. And yeah, let's talk about a fun example, one that involves cool IoT technology. And I'm going to dovetail on Pauline's message about culture, because really culture is king. And that's what this example is going to be about. So one of the challenges with IoT devices, we've all got them in our houses, smart lights, smart thermostats, and all sorts of things, is that they're usually controlled by an app. And let's face it, all these apps clutter up our phones. It can sometimes be cumbersome to use. You don't touch it in the right place, it just doesn't work. So a Singapore-based company that manufactures robot vacuum cleaners decided to do away with their need for an app and deployed an NLP-based technology. And for those that are unfamiliar, it stands for natural language processing, which enables people to communicate with their vacuum cleaners via an AI-powered chatbot. So think about text a message, vacuum my floor, and then it just does its thing. No need for an app. Within the first 24 hours of deploying this technology, the system recorded numerous exception commands in its logs, such as be quiet, turn it off, and many other colorful commands that I'm not going to mention in a public forum. Apparently, what was happening was the customer would receive a phone call, and then the vacuum cleaner's noisy motor would just drown out the conversation, so you wouldn't be able to hear anything. So in a state of frustration, the customer grabs his phone, types in, be quiet. And of course, the command wasn't in the system, so it just responds in a very patronizing tone, unknown command, please re-enter. By now, he's getting really frustrated and starts typing in, much stronger commands. And of course, the robot, with its patience of a saint, just responds, unknown command, please respond. So you can kind of imagine how this went down. This engineer examined the logs and figured out that what the customer really wanted was a pause command. Really simple, just pause cleaning. Within 40 minutes of analyzing the log, this engineer was able to implement and deliver this differentiating feature to their global customer base via the cloud, while the competition wasn't even aware that the need existed. So if you think about it, nobody is actually telling the company, hey, this stuff don't work. In a typical situation, when people are frustrated with technology, they return it, they write bad reviews, they tell all their friends, don't buy this, don't do business with this company. But nobody actually tells the company, hey, can you do this? Like, there's no suggestion box. So what this company did right, and this also goes to what Dirk had mentioned, about understanding the value of data. They broke down the data silos by, number one, leveraging the state-of-the-art technology. Goes back to Anand, the conductor, they state-of-the-art technology, cloud, NLP, AI, hiring the right in-house talent who had the right skills to not only deliver the new capabilities to the customer, but also take the time to learn about what does this customer want? What's he actually asking? You know, what do they like? What do they not like? And this is a true credit to leadership for cultivating that kind of culture and conveying it to the workforce, implementing the right processes in place for the engineer to then use that information and improve their development agility. I mean, 40 minutes to deliver a feature is amazing, and then give themselves that competitive edge in the marketplace. So in essence, this company leveraged the right technology, the right AI, with the right direction and guidance from their leadership to really put their company in a good place in the market.
Very, very interesting topic. Maybe Anand, because we talked now about this also kind of maybe misconception between data science, or maybe training a model and like really building user-centered or human-centered AI applications. And maybe as we approaching, sadly, we're pretty much already at the end of our conversation today. Maybe an insight from you on the one hand, what do you think should be kind of the leadership skills when talking about data science teams? What are you also looking for? And maybe on the other hand, also, what's your experience also with kind of board members, and what would you advise them? What is typically missing on that level?
Yeah, definitely, Andreas. So what we look for in data scientists were actually working with the business people are really three things. It starts with 3 C's, right? So first is curiosity. So we really want the data scientists to be curious both on the business problems that they are trying to solve so that they can understand it better, as well as curious about all the new techniques that are emerging. Every day there is a new technique or a variation. So they need to be adept at both. So curiosity, I would say, is number one. And that automatically leads to the next one, creativity. Right? So data scientists, I would say, is sort of still more of an art than a science. Yes, there are lots and lots of math and the coding and so on, but still when to employ what is still very much an art. So you really need to be very good at solving some of those problems. Let me just give you an example. I think a number of my panelists have mentioned the notion of data and how important it is. So we were in a project on car share, ride share, and looking at business model simulation, and we needed to get ride share data and very detailed trip behavior as to where people were traveling from point A to point B. That data did not exist, right? So in the form that we wanted, but the team was very creative in looking at congestion data, looking at map data, looking at various things to actually create a synthetic trip behavior data. And later on, when some of the providers released some of their data, we were very close to within 2 to 3% of accuracy. So that's what I mean by creativity, right? So you need creativity. The third one I would look for is communication, right? So your data scientists are not supposed to be just holed up in a place sort of typing away with their keyboard and doing things. So they really need to be communicating with the business. So when the two meet, that's when problems get solved, right? So otherwise there's no solution to the problem. So these three are the sort of the data scientist capabilities. What I would say for a leader who is managing them is 2 additional C's. So one is be a good coach, and the other one be a good collaborator. So coach, so the team really needs you to be a hands-on coach and a guide, as opposed to really doing a command and control of your team, right? So you really need to be helping them. And collaborator, because as I think most of you have said, and also previously in the forum, people have been talking about educating the people, educating the business group. So I think that really needs that collaborative approach and the problem-solving approach. So I would say these 5 C's are the most important.
Thank you. Maybe Dirk, now talking about different competencies and adding those. So maybe talk from your experience a little bit how your teams changed and what's also your experience in that.
First of all, I would add another C to Anna in terms of stay cool, because you might generate a lot of insights which has no meaning. In order to do so, we have introduced actually 3 major roles in the organization, and the whole team bundling these roles. The first role, of course, are the roles of data scientists. We have recruited a couple of people from a very, let's say, research-oriented area, and then together, actually, Andreas, with you and your team, we have educated them to become data scientists. So this is the core of the group. The second is a very technical role. We call them data engineers, because we have to link those data sources we have identified and pump the data, so to speak, into the data lake in order to make the data available and clean them and cleanse them and etc. in order to prepare the data. And finally, there's the third role, which is on the business side. I mean, Anand, you mentioned you have to bring the data scientists together with the business. On our side, we have made sure that the interface is compatible. And we have done so with a role we call data analyst. So while the data scientist is identifying the pattern, the meaning is brought out of the context of the business analyst, which is part of the business R&D or wherever you have located them. And those three roles actually are really the core of the team we call analytics services, and have bundled this as a kind of shared service within my group, actually, as a digital department, and made them available for the whole organization. Last but not least, of course, we have started also education on the management side. And this goes along with what I mentioned before, in order to share the importance and the stimulus, so to speak, for the right noise in terms of the orchestra that has to be conducted.
Thank you. And I think that's, again, a perfect handover to Pauline. Now we dive deep into data and data science. Now getting back to the board level, from your experience, and maybe that is kind of a last point as we already run over time, what are the leadership skills needed for digital and AI transformation programs?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would say from my side, to build on the other panelists, I would talk about four. Being humble, which is an ability to accept feedback. Being an adapter, meaning adapt decisions and being able to change. And also don't forget to be visionary and empower your people, and be engaged, be out there and listen. I would say as well that this digitalization is also kind of a business agility. When you often talk about three capabilities, it's to be kind of hyper aware about things, able to detect, to monitor and change, and also to always work with informed decision making and also fast execution. I think most of you have heard Jeff Bezos talking about everything you create, someone else will replicate. So really being on your toes all the time and be able to change. And as a conclusion, to come back to my chief digital officer, this role is obviously not easy. And the digital role is a balance between competence and credibility, and also the level of ambiguity of the job definition. And to balance this digital competence and internal credibility is not easy. So at the end, to say it very simple, the CDO needs these digital tentacles to have a great network internally and connections. Thank you.
Thank you. And then ultimately becoming the chief AI and digital officer when we have more AI in practice. So thank you from my side to this great panel here. I think we could have talked much longer on the different topics that we had, but sadly, I actually have to hand over to you. Thanks for having us here, and well, handing back to you.
Thanks a lot to you, Anand, Pauline, Dirk, and Avraham for this fruitful insight, and thank you, Andreas, for moderating this panel with such dedication. Dear audience, feel free to connect with them on social media and exchange. It's definitely worthwhile. I'm breaking my tongue. We're getting to the end. Wow, it's already time for our grande finale. Bye, guys. It's time for our grande finale with Luca Finelli about learning to lead, leading to learn. Luca, you are head of Insight Strategy and Design for the newly formed Data Science and AI unit in Novartis Digital. You are also program and system owner of NerveLive, a next generation advanced analytics platform exploiting machine learning and cutting-edge data science. Your passion for computational intelligence goes back to the early 90s, when you got a first.
Yes, perfect.
Now
great.
we are somehow missing a lot. Okay, so I will now, Luca, hand over directly to you. Somehow I have now a technical problem. Thanks, Luca, for being with us and sharing your insights with our audience as the final keynote.
Thank you, Dalit. And I would like to first thank the organizer of this event for giving me the opportunity to speak today, to you, Dalit, to Andy, Livia, and everyone else. So I'll, like the theme of the conference, my talk is going to talk about leadership in AI and how AI is changing the role of the leader, and how, while AI is learning to lead, how the leaders need to start leading to learn and learn more about what AI does. And this is actually a title of a book. It's the title, I took it from a book on leadership written by Katie Anderson, but it just doesn't have the AI in front of it. So I thought of starting with something that we all got exposed to pretty much during these days, which is soccer, which is the EU championship that's happening. And I think as everyone was following at least the match today, has seen how one job in there has been changed by technology, and it's the job of the referee. Like today, the referee in an important match like the ones we see at the EU is not working alone anymore, but thanks to technology, is accessing the virtual assistant referee center, which is actually a physical place with lots of people that are using technology to really track the game and understands what's happening. So this is an example where technology has really changed the role of the leader. The leader here is the referee, and that needs to trust technology because technology is giving him or her more precision into the decisions that they are taking. Now, today, this is not really using AI. It's primarily pure technology augmentation, but actually, like in everything else, also here AI will soon be embedded. In fact, the FIFA has announced that it's planning to deploy the first artificially intelligent supported virtual assistance referee next year in 2022. So this is not too far away that in fact, even AI is going to further change that role. But this is not just the one example where technology has been changing dramatically the role of a leader. An example that is very that I like to cite very often is what comes from aviation. Like, and if you take aviation in the 50s, airplanes had very mechanical commands to be controlled. Like the cockpit of a plane looked like it looked here on the left side, with lots of analog meters, a real joystick or cloche to control the plane, and lots of physical effort even needed for the pilot to keep this in flight. In the 60s, and then more concretely in the industry of airplanes in the 80s, aviation started to introduce the so-called fly-by-wire, which essentially replaced mechanical and hydraulic and electromechanical command transferring systems with electronic command transferring systems. And this was just the foundation, because then eventually, by making this electric and then eventually digital, more in the 80s and the 90s, they could introduce lots of additional technology that can assist the pilots in controlling the plane. So how did this actually change the role of the leader, in this case, the pilot? Like, this has changed dramatically. The pilot now is essentially controlling a big computer that's actually flying the plane, and the role is more the one of a supervisor that needs to trust the technology, needs to understand what's happening in there, needs to understand if there is any malfunctioning to intervene. But all in all, this has been providing to the flight experience way more safety, way more peace of mind to the pilots and everyone who's into this, into making airplanes fly. And what's even more, today, some of the most modern airplanes are even controlled from the ground, where all of their in-flight information is transferred real time, and there are control centers on the ground that actually can track what's happening on the plane while it's in flight. Another interesting example to look at how AI has basically forced leaders to think differently is the one of gaming. And in particularly, we have here the famous example of AlphaGo from DeepMind. So back in 2016, it's very famous that DeepMind's AlphaGo has defeated the legendary Go player Lee Sedol, which was the winner of 18 world titles and was widely considered the greatest player of the past decade. So the artificial intelligence developed by Google DeepMind actually had secured 4 wins over the master player in the final of 5 at the match challenge. And himself just won 1, right? And for this, he had missed out the 1 million prize that was there. And AlphaGo essentially was using reinforcement learning to deploy a strategy to win the game. Here is really an example where AI is forcing leaders to change the way they think. And in this case, an opponent of the game, but you can imagine lots of other situations where being sitting together with a system which is equally or even more intelligent on a specific task of what we are and is playing with us into whatever game it is, requires a change of mindset, requires a different attitude to things. So if we take all of these things together, what can we learn from these examples? Like in a world where AI is inside the things we manage, the leaders, and in this case, it's mostly expert leaders, what they need to do? Well, first, they actually need to trust the technology. Like, it's impossible to do anything like that if the leaders don't have trust in that technology. The referee would never accept if the referee doesn't trust the technology that's coming from the VAR, it will not apply in the field, right? So this is fundamental. Then they don't need to be AI experts, but they need to understand enough to then drive the decisions and spot potential issues and handle malfunctioning, exactly like we saw in the case of airplanes. Then they need to change their mindset and they really need to embrace the change that the technology is bringing and leverage at the maximum the technology, because eventually has been developed for adding value to the work process, whatever the process is. And the leader also needs to clarify what is the value provided by technology. It needs to be the first one to understand that, and then needs to provide this clarification to every other stakeholder which is playing in the same field. So needs to act really as an ambassador for the technology or for AI as it comes to play into their game. And also, sometimes the leader needs to make mandatory the adoption of the technology. We have seen a lot of this when we inside the Novartis have deployed control towers to help different areas of our business to manage their processes. People love this stuff. They are very excited about it. It tends to simplify their work and provides lots of transparency and standardization and clarity. However, there is often a natural tendency to go back to do things like you were doing them before. So in some cases, some of our senior leaders had to kind of impose the utilization of the new tools and had to essentially say to their teams, from now on, I don't want you to come to me discussing this one topic by presenting slides or Excel sheets. I want you to discuss the topic by showing me the screens from the Insight Center where the issue that you want to discuss is illustrated. And we're going to use that to then understand what's happening, drill down, and find root causes of potential problems. So with this kind of order from the top, sometimes you can actually force a bit the adoption of a new tool in light of a traditional way of working that people maybe have a little bit of resistance to let go. Now, let's take a brief look into how this is playing out in the healthcare space, which is what I'm representing today. An area which has in general been the poster child for the application of AI in medicine is the area of image analysis, using AI, using deep learning to really understand and interpret medical images. Now, scientists have devised an algorithm that can now sort through and classify images of skin lesions, and it does it apparently even better than the medical experts. And probably this is not surprising, right? Because machines they don't get tired to continuously looking into data and constantly reiterate through that data to find more and more detail. And this is typically something AI can do extremely well, a repeated task with a lot of precisions. So it's probably normal that in many areas AI eventually will surpass the ability of a medical expert to understand information from some data that comes from patients. This is not just true for skin lesions, but there is lots of reports. You can find dozens in the internet on how this has been applied to other diseases. Like here we see an example of a Google AI product that is capable of beating doctors in breast cancer detection, but also for lung cancer, kidney injury, and even eye disease. And particularly in the world of eye disease, deep learning is having lots of impact these days because again of imaging. Because one diagnosis technique that is used for eye and retinal diseases is optical coherence tomography, which is a very simple technique. The ophthalmologist ask the patient to sit in front of an eye camera that takes a shot in the depth of the retina, and then this information is very high resolution and provides lots of insights about the health of the retina. So for the disease of diabetic retinopathy, now even a device have been designed and developed, which even received FDA approval for helping physicians diagnose retinal diabetic retinopathy. Sorry. So these are just a few examples that show how AI these days can basically provide diagnosis. So the question then is, how does the role of the doctor evolve if machines are making diagnosis? And this is probably similar what happened in the aviation space some years ago, right? It's unlikely that AI will replace medical doctors in the ultimate decisions into how to treat patients. However, they can help a lot doctors tremendously into providing those diagnoses, into providing them with lots of precision, with lots of making sure doubts about potential other diseases are removed, and also taking into consideration the full health status of the patients, other diseases that the patients may have, because AI is very good at integrating information and distilling out of this a unique interpretation specific for the data at hand. This is actually a case which is very well described and discussed in depth in a very nice book by Eric Topol, which is called Deep Medicine. So I recommend people to go and check this out. So maybe a last point to touch on this is then what should very, very senior leaders, CEOs and C-suite leaders do around all of this? And a good story is the one, in fact, of Estonia, right? Estonia is the country which seems to be the leader in having been completely digitalized. And you can find lots of readings about this. It's a real success story. And if you go and look at what were the driving factors that made it possible for a country like Estonia to become the #1 digital country, the #1 factor seems to be senior sponsorship. So the fact that the leaders of the country and their direct reports were constantly behind this idea of making Estonia digital and have helped the teams that actually were in charge of making this happen to go through all of the issues and challenges that you may encounter in a journey. So this is the recommendation for C-suite leaders into how to transform leadership in the face of AI. And with this, I'll thank you for the attention to this short talk. And I don't know if there is time for 1 or 2 questions.
A great applause to you, Luca, and thanks for this inspiring closing keynote. And we do have a question I would like to share, although I know time is already over. But there is one question. As a leader, what is your strategy to getting hard AI adopters within an organization?
Yeah, first, I think you need to always be clear about value, right? Something can be as fancy as you want, but if it doesn't provide value to the future users, it's unlikely to be adopting in the long term. So having a very clear picture of how the solution is going to change the way of working of people, how it's going to make their life simpler, how it's going to reduce cost, how it's going to reduce the time it takes to get something done, how is it somehow transforming all of this eventually even in dollar amounts that people potentially could even book into their P&L. Without this is very hard to get AI adopted. People need to find something in it for them for changing really the way of working.
Thanks a lot. And this is exactly also what we always say. We have to share, to exchange experience, to show what works, what doesn't work, where are the fears. And I really liked actually the use case that Avraham mentioned with regards to the vacuum cleaner. This shows so much about the importance of these iterative processes involving the team, the client, everyone, to make sure that we are on the right path. Luca, thanks a lot for being with us again and doing this final keynote. I'm looking very much forward to do more together with you and Novartis. Stay healthy and see you soon after summer break.
Thank you.
Wow. We were once again able to listen to phenomenal thought leaders and experts sharing their experience with our audience. I would like to summarize and share with some, share some of the takeaways. And I would like to start with the great quote George brought up right at the beginning from Peter Drucker. Leadership is person's vision to higher sights, raising of a person's higher standard of building a personality beyond its normal limitations. When I've heard that, I must say I saw myself when I started in early ages with my career, and I'm very thankful that I always had very, very great leaders who brought me to where I am. And there also, I'm just thinking of, it's not only the leaders in the business world, it's also my parents and my family. So this is something that shows us how important it is that we are surrounded by great people who show us the way. And as Alex expressed, we the human beings setting our own limitations. We heard that leaders are facing different kind of challenges and obstacles, and that we should never feel like a hostage. We actually always have the possibility to talk. We must set people free, create bonds, and empathize with the people who have fear with AI. Let's skim quickly through the 10 essentials that George shared with us. It's about emotional intelligence, agility, empathy, culture intelligence, critical and creative thinking, judgment, humility, courage, intuition. Leadership is about influencing, what shows its huge responsibility we have to take as leaders. We should never stop thinking. We should not delegate to data scientists only. We're all responsible. We should involve, start small and fail fast, being willing to take risks and collaborate in an ecosystem and including research. Understand enough to drive decisions, spot issues, and malfunctioning. These were some words from Luca. AI challenges us and at the same time empowers humans to greater things. We are here to do these challenges together. And I would like to close with a nice quote from the sailors. When wind of change blows, some take shelter in the harbor while others sail. So saying that, before I wish you great summer holidays, I'm inviting the whole team of SwissCognitive to stand here, and I would like to thank all of them, and especially tell you who all makes this great cognitive virtuals happen. This is always about a team. Now I have to go up, down. I go back because you guys know me. Oh. So we do have in the back Antonia. Can you wave? Antonia, wave. Okay, Antonia, we all have to go down a little bit so people can see her. Antonia. She is already supporting us in her free time since, I think, almost 3 years, Antonia. So she's one of our youngest SwissCognitive ambassadors. Then we do have, we're missing Tom, huh? But you all saw Tom. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. And Tom, you saw him moderating the panel. He's supporting Livia a lot with getting the speakers. And Livia, voila, she is definitely the woman behind the scene, making sure all the speakers are in the agenda, getting the information that I'm getting, the information from you guys, that everything works, that Andy has all the information he needs to make clear that the screen works is the right information. Then we do have Julia, who is working also, not only making some research about the speakers, she's also doing and helping with the teleprompter and the text. Then we do have Vali. Vali, you have to wave. Vali, she is the woman, the social media woman. She makes sure that you guys are out there seeing the different news and sharing the posts on our different social media. And last but not least, before I'm coming to Andy, we do have Sapir. Sapir, she is the woman behind the chat. So when you are chatting, she is the one managing all this and also delivering the questions to me via WhatsApp. And last but not least, and I'm so happy you saw Andy this time on stage, the man behind the scene. You see, we are actually a girls in tech company with one man. I'm telling you, diversity makes things bigger. So Andy and I co-founded SwissCognitive together, but we would be nowhere without this little great team and all of you out there. So thanks a lot, stay healthy, and we are looking very much forward to see you again here on stage virtually, September 2nd. We will keep you posted. Bye.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers, Dalit.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.
L'chaim.
Oh, cheers. Thank you so much. All good? Yeah. I'm here.